So a long time ago, I did a whole bunch of videos showing off all of the classic Sonic games. That was basically when I started my channel. It's been a really long time since I actually looked back at the classic era. It's also been a long time since I looked back on the adventure era and stuff. So I figured this was a good time for me to do a Sonic retrospective. Like, this is something I've been wanting to do for a pretty long time. Just so I could, like, reminisce about the Sonic games that I like, and celebrate them, review them. Well, not review them technically, but more talk about my opinions on them. I guess I'm going to be sticking to the main games. Like, I'll go over the Game Gear games, but I'm not going to be talking about every single spin-off. So, I guess we'll start with the Genesis titles. For Sonic 1, I really liked it. The main problem with it, though, is the pacing. You got Green Hill Zone, which is pretty nice. It's got a combination of speed and platforming. And then you go straight to Marble Zone. And Marble Zone, well, we all know how that is. It's very slow paced. It's literally based around waiting around on a block. If it was just about platforming, like actual jumping around, then I would like it. But it's just not. It's just waiting, and that makes it mind-numbingly boring. That is the second level in the game. And after that, we got Spring Yard Zone, which is full of bumpers, send you in directions you don't want to go, and rollers that randomly slam into you. The levels are not in the proper order. I think it would be best if the level design was like, it had Marble Zone and Labyrinth Zone at the end of it, just before Scrap Brain, and Starlight Zone was the second zone, and Spring Yard was the third. Like, that way, it would be a lot more, it would have a much better difficulty curve. Sonic 1 is definitely the most platformy of the classic games. It might be the second most platforming Sonic game ever, right behind, like, Sonic Colors for the Wii. But I like it, like, in fact, Sonic 1's platforming is the most satisfying platforming that Sonic has ever had to me. Especially when I was playing it on Sonic Mega Collection with a GameCube controller, because I played the Sonic 1 remake, but it's on Android, so I had to plug in an Xbox 360 controller with its D-pad. It's not very good for 2D platformers, like, because the D-pad is so big, it takes longer to press back on the control pad. I did not have a fun time with, like, Scrap Brain Zone with that controller, even though I liked it the first time I played it with a GameCube controller. Like, it's amazing how much of a difference the type of controller that you have can make. In general, like, I really like Sonic 1, but only with a good controller. Like, it's got good platforming. The special stages are completely luck-based, though. I don't know why they decided to put so many bumpers in them. Like, I've seen a few ROM hacks that actually make good special stages because they're a lot more linear and they don't have nearly as many bumpers that can send you into goals, making you fail it. At least the Chaos Emeralds don't get you supersonic, so you don't really need to get them to get the best experience of the game. Now, the boss fights, well, the same can be said for all of the classic boss fights. I think the boss fights of the classic era are the best because they're so quick and easy. You just attack him, and like occasionally it's about waiting for your opportunity to attack. Like in Oil Ocean Zone's boss, you just jump under the platforms and then wait until your opportunity to attack. Then you wait some more. But even when the bosses are like that, it's never Sonic Rush bad, where you're bored out of your mind waiting for an opportunity to attack. The bosses in the classic era are fine, like they're done over with really quick, which is good. That's how platformer bosses should be. Platforming is not about the boss fights. Boss fights are just an annoyance that interrupt your levels. At least that's how I see it anyways. Like, I don't think it should be a whole epic, dragged out thing, you know? I'm one of the few defenders of Labyrinth Zone. I mean, it has really cheap enemy placement. Like, sometimes the drill enemies can just jump at you from below. But the thing is that the bubbles are always exactly where you need them. There's tons of invincibility monitors, so you can just run through. So you don't really have to worry about drowning very often, and There's also the fact that because the water slows you down, it makes platforming easier because you land or jumps easier. It's a great platforming level. I don't like the enemies, but the platforming is really good, and even the boss fight, I find it to be very satisfying to perfectly avoid every obstacle, because I time and do my jumps exactly right to avoid the spears and the fireballs. I feel like it's really rewarding my skill and thinking ahead. Not like the Sonic 4 Episode 1's version of that boss, where the chase is just mind-numbingly boring and bland, and then you get to an actual boss after that, which is just full of crushers that send you all the way back to the beginning of the chase sequence if you die. As for Sonic 2, I am not very fond of Sonic 2. I thought for sure that I would like it more than Sonic 1 because it introduced the spin dash, and like, obviously Sonic 1 has early installment weirdness with the lack of a spin dash, like you can't easily get up upward slopes in loops. You actually need to make sure that you're running fast towards them in the first place. But just having a spin dash alone and getting rid of the third act alone does not make Sonic 2 a better game. The enemy placement and the enemies themselves are atrocious. I played pretty much all the 2D Sonic games by this point, except for like the Boom games. And I just hate how every enemy in Sonic 2 has projectiles that they throw at you. When it's a platformer, then you're by definition jumping into the enemies to attack them, but if they throw projectiles or shoot them from off screen like an Oil Ocean Zone, then you're guaranteed to get hit by them while you're trying to jump at the enemies in the first place. The biggest problem with 2D Sonic in general is that you're always trapped at the center of the camera, so you can't really see what's ahead of you when you're barreling ahead trying to go fast. And that's fine if you're curled up into a ball because it's an extended speed section, although that only really gets to happen in Sonic 3, unfortunately. But the biggest problem with Sonic 2 is that because you can't actually see what's ahead of you, you're constantly running into enemies that you couldn't possibly have seen coming. And the level design in general is just so devoid of speed. I mean, there's random spikes all over the place that will always stop you. And it's not like you run into them and get hit, it's that you run into the sides and get stopped and all of your momentum is destroyed. It's just like in Sonic Adventure 1. There's so many instances where it's not real platforming and you just have to either slowly navigate left and right, like a Mystic Cave Zone where you're navigating around these moving crates that can crush you. I don't think that's very fun. And it's also like you just hold right and press the A button. It's like you're jumping upstairs. It's like the biggest problem with Sonic 2's level design is that they dumbed down the platforming, but they didn't increase the speed of the level design to compensate. Sonic 3 alone had the perfect level design when it comes to being fast-paced for a classic Sonic game. Because it had extended speed sections where you hit a dash pad, like in Hydro City Zone or Launch Base Zone, and sometimes you didn't even have to do that, like sometimes a hand would grab you and force you forwards down water slides, and sometimes you just spin dash on top of the slope. And you go into an extended section where you go through slopes and loop-de-loops, and if you were smart, you curled up into a ball throughout that time so that you would go even faster. None of the other classic Sonic games have stuff like that, and that irks me because that's the most thrilling part of the gameplay. I like platforming, but if all you like in a Sonic game is platforming and you think speed is just a dumb spectacle automation thing, then Sonic's not really for you. Because Sonic is about the speed. That's what separates his gameplay from Mario, is taking advantage of the physics to go fast. And even then, the thing you need to keep in mind is the whole reason that Sonic 1 was so platformy was because they already thought they were taking a huge risk in the first place by having a speed-based game that was a platformer, when platforming is all by definition slow. That's why Sonic 1 had so much platforming, to make sure it would succeed. Even if the technology was capable at the time of making a 3D boost game or a rush boost game, do you really think that Sega would have taken that risk so early? Just because Sonic started out as more like Mario and like platforming doesn't really mean that that's the perfect way. Like, it's about platforming, sure, but speed is the theme of the series. That's why I love the boost gameplay so much. But anyways, back on topic. I don't understand why people say that Sonic 2's level design is fast-paced, when Sonic 3 exists as a game. Because every time I try to play Sonic 2, I want to brainwash myself into liking it. I want to like it so bad, but I get past Chemical Plant Zone, and it all goes downhill from there. Like, I love Chemical Plant Zone. Even the rising water section with the blocks is really satisfying with how you have to land precisely on platforms. It's very satisfying to get right, and I got through that just fine in my first playthrough. Like, I love Chemical Plant Zone, I love how fast-paced it is, and while it is way too punishing when you screw up because it crushes you a whole bunch, aside from that, it's a really good stage. I don't understand why the rest of the game isn't designed like that, or at the very least, most of it. But instead, past Chemical Plant Zone, you get stuff like Casino Night Zone, which is full of bumpers that send you in directions you don't want to go, and slow springs that you have to spend forever holding the A button on for them to launch you, and sometimes they like to launch you into a loop, but Sonic 2 doesn't really understand loops, because most of the time the loops don't send you forwards into an extended speed section so you can actually take advantage of the burst of speed they gave you. Instead, the loops like to just drop you down onto another slow spring you have to take 8 billion years holding the A button on. Or, in Hilltop Zone's case, the loop-de-loops literally drop you down into a platforming section. Well, I'm so glad I was able to take advantage of that burst of speed. Thanks, game. Like, Hilltop Zone isn't very fun either. I mean, I love the satisfying platforming section with the rising lava, but that's the only good platforming section in the game past Chemical Plant Zone. Everything else is just, you run forwards blindly, hoping you won't run into an enemy. And there's no real platforming, you just navigate through the level, and you don't really get to have much extended sections of speed either. So in general, I don't really like Sonic 2. I want to like it, but the only time I can even find it tolerable is when I cheat to get Supersonic from the very beginning. You just play through the whole game like that. And if you need to play it in Invincible God mode just to have fun, something's wrong. And the final boss is absolutely atrocious. Like, I guess it can be easy once you've memorized it, but it just speaks for itself, really. It's kind of hard to figure out where exactly you need to jump into it to damage it, and I know that if it bends forward, it gives you a free hit on it, but if you wait for that to happen every single time you try to attack it, you're gonna get really impatient, and you're gonna take forever. So every time that I fight that boss, I just use Infinite Rings and Supersonic. I don't think that boss deserves to be beaten legitimately. Not to mention, like, do I even have to talk about Metropolis Zone and Oil Ocean Zone? Like, even people who worship Sonic 2 still think that those levels are terrible. I mean, I think that Metropolis Zone has redeeming qualities, because aside from the terrible badniks that throw projectiles at you and hit you when you're on those rising bolts, like, I hate the bolts. I don't understand why they exist in the level. They're not really contributing anything that a spring couldn't do much better. It just sort of waste your time. But I think that Metropolis Zone has the closest we have to fast-paced level design past Chemical Plant Zone. It's got lots of corkscrew loops, lots of instances where you're going fast. Like, I love the yellow triangles that bounce you back and forth. If we only got more of that, and less of terrible enemies and enemy placement and bolts, then it would be a great level. Like, I like the satisfying platform challenge of, like, carefully watching the square platforms that create spears out of them, and you have to jump on them at exactly the right time. And you jump onto multiple of them at once. I used to hate it, but eventually I found out that they actually create the spears in a clockwise pattern. So it's not completely random which side of the squares that the spears go out of. Sonic 2 has redeeming qualities, like, it has good music. I love the special stage theme, I love a lot of things about it, but I just don't understand why people like it. I want to like it, but I can't. Especially not when Sonic 3 exists. But we'll get to that. Like, Sonic CD versus Sonic CD, it's very, very platformy, but I can still at least go fast if I want to. Like, I can still hold right and enjoy myself. When I first played it, I already thought this is better than Sonic 1 because of the fact that it had more fast-paced level design, and it had the super peel out and the spin dash. I mean, the spin dash is terrible in that game. Like, you have to take forever to charge up. But the super peel out has the exact same problem, let's be real. And you really do suffer from it in the Metal Sonic boss fight. Words cannot describe how terrible the Metal Sonic boss fight is. There's spikes everywhere that you constantly have to jump to avoid. You can't just go forwards, and like, I know that wouldn't be challenging, but oh wait, Generations did that with its boss fight, so never mind. But I really like the soundtrack of Sonic CD, especially the Japanese one. But both of them have their gems. And as for the gameplay, well, I like most of the levels up until a certain point. Like, Quartz Quadrant is okay, but it all goes downhill from there. Stardust Speedway, like, it has this stupid gimmick where you have to jump onto flipping things to change what's in the background and what's in the foreground. But those things that you're walking on don't change graphics to make it clear that you can walk on them now. So it's just a very confusing level to try to navigate through, and I just hate it. And Wacky Workbench Act One is really terrible because you have to get the platforming exactly right, and if you land on the workbench, then you'll get bounced upwards really high, and you'll get trapped on these stupid long platforms, and you have to slowly walk to the left and then walk to the right to slowly get your way back to the bottom route. It's like the exact opposite of what Sonic level design should be. The higher route is supposed to be the good one. Like, it's by definition good because you're a lot less likely to fall into a bottomless pit there. So you should be rewarded for getting to it by being skilled enough at the platforming that you can get up to it. I don't like how Sonic CD tends to have its level design based around the assumption that you're going to be spending a long time looking for robot generators to destroy. Well, that's not really Sonic-like. Like, the level design is very vertical, not Knuckles Chaotix bad, but like, you can still run ahead and go fast if you want to. The level design is a mess, I'll admit it, but it's a fun mess. There's a reason that I enjoyed the game enough that I played it all the way through 4 times in a row, and that's not including the time that I played through all the levels on Time Attack. So it's a game that I like. The bosses are terrible though. Like, I really hate the boss in Quartz Quadrant, where you have to spend 8 billion years running on a conveyor belt, and only then will Eggman, like, lose. That was really unintuitive for me to figure out at first. And I also don't like the boss of Wacky Workbench, where it's basically just a platforming challenge. Like, you wait for a block to fall that can actually crush you or hurt you, and then you jump to the other block because somehow you're supposed to know that the other block that you jump to is always going to rise higher than the one you first chose. And then at the very end, it suddenly changes the rules on you and cheaply pulls a fuck you by, if you stay on the block, then that's the only way you can survive, because otherwise you'll get crushed by the ceiling. How are you supposed to know that? So I think the bosses are pretty terrible in that game. Like, I don't like the one in Untitled Tempest either, because sure, he surrounds himself with air bubbles, and that makes it impossible to drown, but the fact remains that when you take air, you automatically get bounced back to the ground, like diagonally. That makes you very vulnerable to the projectiles that he shoots out. And since you're underwater, you're too slow to easily get your rings back, so it's surprisingly easy to die. So the bosses are really annoying. I like how the final boss is easy though, especially since it's so annoying just getting to the final boss all by itself. Metallic Madness speaks for itself. It's really annoying, especially one particular act of it, but in general I like Sonic CD, but Sonic 3 is a lot better. Now the thing is, I know that Sonic 3 and Knuckles are technically one game, but I like Sonic 3 alone a lot better than I like Sonic and Knuckles, because Sonic 3 actually understands fast-paced level design. Sonic and Knuckles is a lot more about Sonic 2 level design, where it's like a Mario game. You're just jumping upstairs, which is literally what Lava Rezone is all about. I really like Sonic 3 though, but Sonic and Knuckles, I don't really enjoy. Like, I like Mushroom Hill Zone, and I like I liked Flying Battery Zone, but only after the 5th time I played it. Because it can be kind of confusing figuring out how you're supposed to progress at some points, like past the spinning fan poles that you're swinging around section. How are you supposed to know that you have to go down and then left, and suddenly you can progress with the level? How are you supposed to know you're not just walking towards a wall that will stop you? And plus there's a whole bunch of fire hazards and stuff like that. And I hate trying to run on the rolling things, because sometimes Sonic will just fall and that'll be it. But for the most part, I find Sonic & Knuckles to be kind of a slogfest. Like, Sandopolis Zone is so bland that I find it to be draining how long the levels are. Like, the big problem with Sonic 3 Knuckles is the level length. I remember when I first played the game, I was always shocked and drained when I beat Act 1, because suddenly I was sent to the next act and I was like, wait, there's more? I don't mind it now. Like, at this point, I appreciate the long level length as long as it's a level that I enjoy, because that means that there's more level for me to enjoy. But, I don't know. It's the only Sonic 3 that I really like. I find Sonic & Knuckles to be a lot more tolerable when I played it in Sonic 3 Knuckles, but, like, I was about to say Super Sonic, but then I remember that the game takes away Super Sonic when you get to the Sonic & Knuckles portion of the game. So never mind. Like, I don't like Carnival Night Zone. I think it's really annoying, like with the slow-moving barrels that are just like the slow-moving blocks from Spring Yard Zone. And Casino Night Zone had those too. And I also hate the underwater section that Knuckles creates for you. Like, and a big thing to me about Sonic 3 is the soundtrack. Because obviously it's got the whole Michael Jackson influence there, and it's because of that that we have the stupid copyright laws where we can't ever get a Taxman remake of Sonic 3 because of copyright laws. And it's also because of that that we can't get, like, actual original Sonic 3 music in Generations. Like, we just got MIDI remixes of it instead. So I honestly don't think that the whole Michael Jackson influence thing was worth it. Like, the soundtrack was good, but I don't think it was really worth, like, Sonic 3 Knuckles never really being referenced again. I just hate how Sonic 2 and Sonic 1 get the most references, while the actually fantastic classic Sonic game is just left in the dust. Like, I really like Ice Cap Zone. Well, Act 2 anyways. Act 1 is kind of more like a puzzle level. You just stand on a thing that you move by pushing it, and you have to jump at the right time or you'll be vertically scrolling infinitely. It's more of a slow platforming level until you get to Act 2, which is actually fast. And I love Launch Base Zone. Like, I love how fast it is. I love Hydro City Zone. I prefer to call it Hydrocity Zone because it's a pun on water and velocity. Even if it was unintentional, I don't really care. I mean, Hydro City is the most boring-ass name you could possibly come up with. I mean, it's slightly more imaginative than Green Hill Zone, but still, just because Sega says that's the official pronunciation doesn't mean that's the good one. I mean, come on. It's a fast-paced water level. It's easily the best water level in the franchise. Although occasionally I can find Act 1 to be annoying, but it's so exciting. Like, I like how they have that tense section at the beginning of Act 2 where you have to outrun a wall that chases you. Although this brings me up to why I always play Sonic 3 with Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Because when you do that, you remove really cheap stuff like the spring that sends you back into the wall that's chasing you down. There's also a spring that launches you upwards in a Hydro City Zone that you land on and you get sent into an enemy. So I really hate that. Like you spin dash towards a cannon shooting enemy, and you always get launched up by the spring, and because you carry over your momentum, you suddenly go to the right, and you get hit by the projectile. I never get hit like that in Sonic 3 Knuckles, though. Not to mention Launch Base Zone is extremely cheap in Sonic 3 alone. It's just so much better in Sonic 3 Knuckles. Like, there's so much less fire constantly attacking you. Not to mention you don't have this stupid underwater section where you have to jump off a wall at exactly the right time in order to get into a spinning elevator. And if you don't do it exactly the right time, then you're guaranteed to die. And if you jump instinctively after landing in the elevator because you're so surprised that you did it, then you're basically stuck there in an unwinnable situation because the elevator goes up without you and it won't go down. and there's no air bubbles at all and no way to get out of the section. In Sonic 3 Knuckles though, you can skip it, which is really good. I also like the special stages. Like, the special stages of Sonic 2 were extremely terrible because the draw distance was shit. Like, you could never actually see what was ahead of you, so you'd always end up running into bombs, and you had to memorize where the rings were to beat it. They were better in the Sonic 2 remake though, because it was actually 60 frames per second. But still. Blue Sphere, however, there are special stages that you can actually beat all of them on the first try. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is the only Sonic game where I got all of the emeralds, other than Sonic 4 Episode 1. And like, I really like Hypersonic, how he has the air dash, and I really like just everything about him aside from the fact that he's a walking seizure. Like, Blue Spirit by itself is kind of annoying because you're only restricted to moving in 4 directions, and the camera, it always stays behind you, so I get kind of motion sick because the camera is constantly spinning around every single time that I turn around. It's very tense. I always breathe a sigh of relief when I finally beat a special stage of Sonic 3 Knuckles because it gets faster as you approach the end of it, and that combined with the stiff controls, it just makes me really worried. But I do like it. I like how it's actually beatable. Never really knew as a kid that you had to go in a square around the blue spheres, and that was how you turned all of them into... I don't think that's nearly intuitive enough. So yeah, Sonic 3 Knuckles is a really good game. I only really like the Sonic 3 part of it, but it's easily the best game in the classic series. As for the Game Gear games, again, I think they're heavily underrated. I mean, yes, they aren't nearly as good as, say, Sonic 3 or Sonic 1. Well, I say that, but Sonic 1 for the Master System, and Game Gear even, is easily a lot better than Sonic 1 in some ways, because the pacing is absolutely terrible. Again, in Sonic 1 you go from Green Hill to Marble Zone, but in Sonic 1 for the Master System, it's got a better difficulty curve. The thing about the Game Gear and Master System games is that, well, one, people complain constantly about screen crunch in them. Even though the Genesis games, in fact all 2D Sonic games, had terrible screen crunch, because they're trapped inside of the camera, and it's all about running forwards when you can't really see much what's ahead of you to react in time. Even ignoring that, because, yeah, the Game Gear games do have screen crunch. I've suffered from it, falling into pits a few times. But the big thing about them is that they're mostly about the platforming, because they don't quite have the Genesis physics where it's all about momentum-based gameplay, like you spin dash on the top of a slope, and then you start rolling down it really fast. That still works, sort of, like in Sonic Chaos and Triple Trouble, which introduced the spin dash to the Game Gear games. You can spin dash through loops and down slopes, but there aren't extended sections of the level where there are slopes and loops for you to really take advantage of that speed. In fact, the level design in Chaos and Triple Trouble is kind of a chaotic mess, like there's no proper design mentality to it. With most of the classic Sonic games, there is a clear, meticulous way that the level is designed. Like, it stops you right before sections of the level where you have to platform to slow your brain down and tell you, hey, maybe I shouldn't be still in the mindset of going fast. The best example of this is in Hydrocity Zone, where you get launched straight upwards and you hang in the air for a long time. And because you're not progressing forwards, that allows your brain to slow down and realize, hey, there's platforming coming up. I should be landing on these rising and falling tubes and jumping from one to the other. So that's good level design. Another example is in Green Hill Zone, where you get stopped by a rock, and that actually warns you that you need to platform. So that's generally the level design mentality that the classics are based off of, and the Game Gear games don't have that kind of structure. They're not like the Genesis games. They're still good though. Like, people say they're generic platformers, but if it is true that they can't have the same Genesis momentum-based physics and stuff like that, if that is true, then it's good that they have a focus on platforming. Also because of the screen crunch, because, come on, I don't think screen crunch, like, tiny screens are really well suited for fast-paced running ahead anyways. Sonic Rush, anyone? But Like, it is good that the Game Gear games have most focus on platforming and on interesting gimmicks like vehicles, like the mine carts and Tails' submarine and Sonic Triple Trouble. So I like how it has all sorts of interesting gimmicks and stuff. Sonic 1 for the Master System is really the best platformer Sonic game there is when it comes to platforming. I just feel like Sonic controls perfectly in that game, and I really like the level design. The thing about Sonic 1 8-bit is that the Master System version is much harder. Like, it has Contra Syndrome in Jungle Zone Act 2, with the vertically scrolling level design that if you fall below the screen you die. That didn't happen in the Game Gear version. And the Game Gear version is a lot easier despite the screen crunch, because even with the screen crunch, there are warning signs telling you they're bottomless pits. And the bosses are a lot easier because you can just jump up to them and it's fine. You don't have to wait for them to lower. And like, there's also the fact that in the Master System version, you have to reach the end of the bonus stage in order to actually keep the extra lives that you obtained. And that isn't the case in the Game Gear version. That's why I was only able to beat the Game Gear version. I had to use an emulator to beat the Master System version. So, strangely enough, I actually prefer the Game Gear version of Sonic 1. Aside from the infamous, like, the game resetting itself if you stay too long in the water and labyrinth zone. Although last time I did that glitch, I had to be actively trying for that to happen. And Sonic 2 8-bit has a way too nasty reputation. I mean, I know that it has a few really bullshit parts. The springs level, full of spikes and no rings, in Green Hills Zone Act 3, a platform that sends you up into spikes, and then you have to know to wait for it to lower so you can jump on it again because you need it to progress to the level. Otherwise, it'll despawn if you leave the screen. And let's not forget Scramble Egg Zone with its tube. Like, even if you know the directions to press, you still have to know exactly when to press them. And that's not always intuitive, like the whole tube is just one color. I also don't like Crystal Egg Zone very much, which sucks because you need to go through the tediousness of getting every single emerald, which are hidden dickishly, in order to unlock it. And get the good ending where Tails doesn't die. Like, I get that Sonic 2's Master System is pretty infamous. I really like it though. I generally like the game. I like how satisfying platforming is. Gimmick Mountain Act 1 is very satisfying to play through. Like, I love how there's a conveyor belt section where you can time it just right so that you can jump onto the moving platforms and completely avoid being sent into the spikes on the sides of you. I never had any trouble with that section. I was really proud of that. The thing is that Sonic 2 8-bit, it basically forces you to spend a really long time grinding for lives, getting a whole bunch of rings in Green Hills Zone, or you can use save states in emulator. I don't really like that about it. And of course there's the first boss of that game, which a lot of people died to. For some reason I was able to beat the Game Gear version of that boss on the first try, even though you have to jump really far to the right in order to avoid the bouncing ball in the first place, because of the screen crunch. So I'm not really sure how I was able to do that, but yeah, that ant boss is pretty infamous. I found it harder to get to the boss than to actually beat it, because how are you supposed to know that you can't take the minecart, that you have to roll down the slope and jump, and that's the only way you can get up to the spring that takes you to progress. If you take the minecart, then you'll be stopped by a wall that you don't know is breakable, and you have to run at it and roll at it with enough speed on a very tiny platform that it's hard to gain speed on. So yeah, Sonic 2 8-bit does have a whole bunch of design problems, I'll admit that. In general, I like playing it though. I beat it twice, and I don't have any huge hatred for it aside from those bullshit parts. Like, I have it still on emulator with save states so I can play any level that I want. The bosses are annoying. Like, in general, Sonic 1 and 2 8-bit, I really hate how they force you to fight bosses without rings. Thankfully, the other Game Gear games fixed that. Chaos and Triple Trouble, their level design is kind of a mess, but it's a fun mess. Like, I like how the spin dash makes it faster. Like, Triple Trouble has a huge amount of springs, but I didn't even notice that when I played the game myself. Twice. Sonic Blast, of course, is really terrible. Like, it's slow and looks bad, and Blue Marine Zone is the worst water level ever. You take the tube maze of Scramble Egg Zone, and you put it underwater, and you make those tubes suck you in when you get close to them. That's Blue Marine Zone in a nutshell. It's a labyrinth. What's also a labyrinth is Silver Castle, like you have to memorize where to go. But thankfully, that was the last terrible 2D Sonic game for a very long time. And after that was Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure is great. It's really great. I love the freedom that I get from basically having level design as Sonic that allows me to perfectly take advantage of the fact that it's a 3D environment. Because I can basically look around with the camera. Like, that's another thing, there's actual camera control in that game, which is something you don't really have in the more modern games. I love Red Mountain. That is easily the pinnacle of 3D Sonic level design. At least until the booster anyways, but we'll get to that. What I love about Red Mountain is that there's so many different shortcuts you can take, mainly from taking advantage of spin dash jumping, because, okay, there's a platform all the way over there. Now I could take the long way and walk around a curving path to get to it, or I could spin dash jump over a bottomless pit and get to it in a much cooler fashion. And not only is it about spin dash jumping, which is the primary method of taking shortcuts in that game, but there's also shortcuts where you hold down and right after using a rocket. And there's even a shortcut where you can jump off the side of a mountain to the left of you and not have to spiral around a mountain. I just love Red Mountain so much, and even Act 2 with its badass atmosphere and music, and the camera perfectly works exactly the way you want to create the atmosphere. And even there, the spin dash jump works perfectly for getting over to the platforms quicker. Red Mountain is why I love Sonic Adventure when it comes to Sonic gameplay. And Tails, easily the best alternate gameplay the franchise has ever had. I love the satisfying feeling of taking shortcuts through Sonic's levels using Tails' flight. Now some people may complain that Tails wasn't taken advantage of properly because the levels weren't designed around him. He was just plopped into Sonic's levels. My response to that is that the sheer fact that you already experienced the levels of Sonic makes it a lot more satisfying playing through them as Tails, because you can break them. Like, you can take so many different shortcuts. And besides, some levels really do feel like they were designed for Tails. Like, Speed Highway as Tails? That works great for Tails too. Like, sure, Windy Valley can be completed in one jump. It's better for Sonic because it's all about running in straight lines. It's more like SA2 level design, only a bit too narrow because they're always hugging the sides of the wall. But I really wish that Tails' gameplay from SA1 came back. I mean, I love the boost gameplay so much because of how thrilling it is that I'm okay with Adventure Sonic gameplay never coming back. Although, if their excuse is that Sonic has the boost now and why would he lose it, then there's no reason they can't give the Adventure Sonic gameplay to Shadow, or, well, he has all the abilities of Sonic, but can't they just give it to another character like Espio? I mean, there's no proof that he has the boost, and he played like Sonic and Sonic Heroes, so why can't he just keep that and, or at least let us play as Tails, and then we'd have the SA1 gameplay, and if you had the spin dash and spin dash jump, then we'd have the Adventure Sonic gameplay back too. Of course, the question there would be, why would you use spin dash jump if you could fly? I guess you'd have to nerf it. Never mind. And then there's Gamma. Even though shooting is pretty anti-Sonic, I really do love his gameplay. Like, I feel like such a powerful badass just targeting a whole bunch of enemies at once and getting so much time. Like, the time down mechanic is kind of weird. Like, what, does Gamma run out of batteries? But it really does make for making it a lot more satisfying, racking up points by defeating a whole bunch of enemies at once. Because with the mechs, all you got was points for rank. And who cares about ranks? Ranks in Sonic games don't even really mean skill most of the time. It's not like they're entirely based on how fast you beat the level. But Gamma knew how to make the gameplay satisfying. Not only did it reward you for targeting a whole bunch of enemies rather than just running past them, but it also controlled well, because it was so fluid. You could just run in a circle easily. You got a running mode, like a mode change, where you would start flying along the ground to move faster. Although the levels generally didn't have you moving in a straight line long enough to take advantage of that. It was usually just the hub world thing. The level design for Gamma didn't really make you feel that you were slower than Sonic. Only if you managed to get Gamma into Sonic's levels did you feel that he was slower than Sonic. But because the level design for him was designed around him, and the gameplay was so focused on taking advantage of what he was good at, shooting, you didn't really care that he was slower than Sonic. That's how it should be. I also loved how he could float in the air. Like, that was really cool. I don't know why he didn't start out with that ability. Same goes for the mechs in Desi 2. Unfortunately, Adventure is also pretty infamous for a bunch of other terrible gameplay styles. Now, Knuckles is the best of it because he has level design and gameplay based entirely around his abilities. He would obviously completely break a 3D game because he can glide infinitely. I mean, he slowly goes down, yes, but if you jumped up from a high incline, you'd be able to just glide for a really long time, and it would be boring because you would just be gliding and that was it. It's not nearly as fun as flying. I guess because flying is faster, stuff like that. Like, you get to fly through dash rings. I don't know why you immediately stop right after getting that burst of speed for them. That's really lame, but other than that, I don't know. I don't think Knuckles would really work in 3D, so that's why they needed to give him the treasure hunting aspect, because that was the only way they could have level design that properly takes advantage of how he can glide and climb, because they just make him an exploration character. And in order to add replayability, they have the locations of the Emerald Shards randomized. And the Emerald hunting works because he's a guardian of the Master Emerald, so he's looking for the Emerald pieces. The problem is that some of the Emerald Shards can be in really annoying and obtuse places. Like, there's one that's apparently to the right of the vault in Casinopolis. I have no idea how I'm supposed to get it to this day, and every time an Emerald Shard spawns there, I end up restarting and trying again. Sometimes the Emerald Shards can put in really obnoxious places, like, it's not always intuitive where you should dig exactly, although that problem gets a lot more horrendous in SA2. In SA1, you usually just dig in the center of rings and it's fine. In Lost World, however, you dig right in front of a tiny pillar sticking out of the ground, but there's multiple pillars, so it's kind of confusing. Plus, it's a vertical level. Like, the radar doesn't really do well with vertical. It doesn't really do well with the Y-axis, because it can tell you that an emerald is close to you on the Z and X-axis, but if an emerald's right above you, you're not going to know it. So you're not going to know that you can just climb straight upwards and get it. The treasure hunting mission in Sonic Generations was infinitely better than the treasure hunting in the adventure games. Even if it was a bit too easy, I really liked it. Like, I liked how there was always an arrow above your head pointing exactly where you should go. And there's more, like, I don't think there should be more Emerald Shards than you need to get in the level, because that wouldn't really make any sense story-wise. It would be kind of stupid, but just don't put them in annoying places. Don't make it impossible to tell where exactly you should dig to get them. And obviously don't completely screw up the radar so that there's no blue emerald detecting anymore, and that you can detect all of them at once. And don't make it so that there's no radar at all like in 06. Treasure hunting's not doomed from the start, it's just that it's entirely based on luck whether you love it or not. Because if you're lucky, then there's no problem for you, but if you get a bad randomizing thing, if you get bad RNG, you're going to take a while finding all of the Emerald Shards. So ultimately, it's not a very good gameplay style. And then you get to Amy, who's so slow and her acceleration is so terrible and wonky. Then you get to Big, who's extremely awful in every way. The camera does not really, there's no actual first-person view, so it's hard to find Froggy. And just getting Froggy to grab the lure is a task all by itself. Now, I would love the fishing if it was like the Twilight Princess, but it just isn't. Fishing can be done right, and if it was fun, then I would like it even if it is stupid for it to be mandatory in a Sonic game. But it just wasn't. I hate how just tapping the analog stick even the slightest bit sends it flying a million yards away in a direction you didn't even press. Why can't it just move a tiny bit to lure the fish? And why do fish grab the lure when you don't want them to, when you only want to catch Froggy to end the mission? Why can't the fish just be restricted to the extra missions? Because literally everything about Big's gameplay is broken every way. I hate the red bar mechanic and how you lose a life if the lure breaks. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know how big we get in other fishing lore, but still. As for the story, obviously the adventure games have the best story in the franchise. There's no doubting that. There's the best emotional impact, there's exciting things going on. I don't understand why people say the story is convoluted when, I mean, I never had any trouble understanding it. Sure, it involves a whole bunch of different characters and their perspectives on things, but even if it was confusing, you see repeated cutscenes so much that you think that it would be better into your head by now. I don't know. I never really found it confusing at all. It's pretty easy to understand what's going on. I love the character arcs. Like, I love how it develops Amy's character beyond being a stalker with a crush. In fact, she barely ever chases after Sonic at all. She just, even in fact in the Japanese script, they barely even mention that she has a crush on Sonic at all. She just likes him and that's it. The story is about her being caring and idealistic enough to help a simple bird, while Sonic is focused on saving the world. She's the heart and soul of the group. Her job is to do the talking. That's why she talks to Gamma and got him to redeem himself. Well, not redeem himself, more like just free his family. You know what I mean. The weird thing is that people say that Tails has a character arc where he gets more independent and secure with himself. But I never really saw that. He was acting so bratty for most of the game, and he had no problem with doing stuff on his own. Like that very last line right before Speed Highway seemed to come completely out of nowhere. For most of the game, he was confident. Like, Sonic said to him at the beginning of the game, "Long time no see," implying that Tails had spent a long time without Sonic already. And it was no big deal to him. I guess this was the first time he was the hero of the world, fighting against Eggman by himself. Except he battled an entire army of birds in Tails' Adventure, but whatever. I guess he was like 3 years old when it happened, so he doesn't remember it anymore. Point is, I love this game. I wish they gave another shot at it, but I'm happy with the Boost games for now. And after Sonic Adventure 2 came Sonic Heroes. A game that I'm really glad that I played, because if I didn't, I would have kept believing the majority opinion that it's worse than Adventure 2 and it's just not a very good game. Honestly, I was really surprised at how much I liked it, because everyone kept saying that it got worse after Adventure 2, and I was like, Adventure 2 isn't really that great now that I've looked more critically at it. Like, it's okay, but not really that good, especially not compared to Adventure 1. So, I used to think that Heroes wasn't even worth playing because it was said to be worse. But now that I've played it, it's actually a pretty good game. The main complaint people have with Heroes is the controls. And I'll admit the controls aren't supernaturally tight like they are in Adventure 2 and Adventure 1, which is slightly better. But just because they're not as good doesn't mean that they're terrible, atrocious bullshit. Like, I went to Heroes after spending a really long time playing Sonic Generations, and it controls like a dream compared to that. It helps that I was finally able to play with a GameCube analog stick again, because I just think the GameCube analog stick is better than the Xbox 360 one. It feels less stiff. Because it's more sensitive, I don't have to move my finger as much to make my character move the way I want, and so I don't end up overcompensating and turning too sharply and stuff. But anyways, the controls, occasionally they get slippery. Like, sometimes you'll get launched by a ramp, and you'll land on the ground after being in the air, and you'll burst forwards. But here's the thing. You can just turn around and jump, and that'll cancel out all your momentum. You'll slow to start really quickly. And the vast majority of the time, it doesn't even matter. Because, one, the level design is designed around the controls. Generally, it's very wide open space. Like, it's not narrow like, say, SA1's Emerald Coast. Because if you go play the Emerald Coast mod for Sonic Heroes PC, you'll see that, yeah, it is actually pretty narrow. Something you don't notice with the more precise controls of SA1. But in Heroes, the level design is actually pretty wide open, so it doesn't really matter, because you're not constantly expected to squeeze into narrow corridors and precisely navigate yourself into them. So it's more, the level design accounts for the fact that sometimes you can move a bit too far in a direction. And another thing is, because the level design is designed around the controls. So most of the time when you're in those moments of slipperiness, there's walls to stop you. Like, the biggest example of the slipperiness I can find is after you're launched from a ramp onto one of the square platforms in Ocean Palace. Like near the end of Team Rose's version of the level. None of that ever matters because you're always going to be stopped by the walls that are completely surrounding the inside of the platform. And even when there aren't walls to stop you, generally your character is going to stop at the edge of the platform. Like they're going to do a almost falling off the platform animation. That's going to save you. So I barely ever died to, like occasionally you can cling on to your momentum a bit too much, but for the most part, I barely ever died. Like I can count the amount of times I died to slippery controls on one hand. In fact, I'm struggling to think of any times that I actually did. And I've done 2 full playthroughs of this game by this point. Now that may seem not very much to most people, but keep in mind that if a flaw of a game is really bad, then you're going to experience it on the first 2 playthroughs. If it's not really that big of a deal, then the playthroughs where you're most likely to run into it, the first 2, if you don't run into that flaw when you're first playing the game, it's not really that big of a deal. So the level design is wide open enough, there's plenty of walls everywhere. And another thing is, you'd think that slightly slippery controls would affect the platforming negatively and make you overshoot your jumps and stuff. But because of the fact that you can switch to a flight formation at any time you want with press of a button, you can just fly and you'll be fine. Like, it's a very good way to cheese platforming. You never have to worry about getting a platforming wrong because you can just fly. Now, granted, the flight is gimped compared to FA1. You can't fly ridiculously far, and it's also pretty slow. It don't really matter because I don't mind that the flight character is slow, because I'm focusing on getting my platforming right. So that's the thing, the speed character is fast, that's what it's good for, and the flight character is about flight. So it's not going to be fast, it doesn't need to be. And the power character, well, I really don't like the fact that the power character is slow. Like, at the end of Seaside Hill, when I'm sent down a narrow speed section, and one of those things that automatically changes your character, changes me to Knuckles, usually I switch back to Sonic so I can run up to the blocks faster. Even though the whole reason they switch you to Knuckles is so that you can break the blocks without having to switch at all. I just don't think he's fast enough. That's not a big deal because, like, I don't think, like, the power type is so slow that I don't feel like playing as him most of the time. I tried to play most of Team Chaotix as just a power type to switch things up, but I just couldn't stand how he's not fast enough. So I don't understand how people can mostly play the game as a power type, and, like, sure, the power type and the flight type control perfectly, but they're so slow that you don't want to use them. So you want to use the speed type, which is faster, and thus, like, holds on to their momentum. Like it's weird. People love momentum in Sonic games. That's why they demonize Sonic 4 so much. But when you put momentum in Sonic Heroes, so much momentum, in fact, that in Grand Metropolis, one of the most satisfying things to do is to jump off the top of a slope and have your momentum carry you through the air into Rainbow Rings. That is so satisfying. That's such a classic Sonic thing to do. But for some reason, having that momentum translate to a 3D game causes people to hate it and say that it has slippery controls. Like, there are people who hate on Heroes just because they think the controls are absolute garbage, and I was shocked right from the very beginning playing it that this is actually not that bad. Like, I just tried it out on Dolphin just to see if it was really that bad, because I got in the mood that I really wanted to try the game out to see if it was good or not, because I knew 3 people, well, I didn't know them, but they were YouTube personalities, who liked the game. Eventually I couldn't stand anymore. I wanted to see if they were right, and from Seagate alone, the controls weren't that bad. They're certainly a lot better than the Boost games, that's for sure. And that's a pretty low standard, but still. So, in general,
the big reason why I like Sonic Heroes is because there's so much that you can do in the levels because of the 3-character gameplay. It's not just about jumping. It's also got all sorts of gimmicks like punching flip panels to launch you, and breaking the floor beneath you, and breaking cracked walls. And you can also use the Thunder Shoot to flip panels that are far away from you. That's the thing about Sonic Heroes, is that even though it has tons of different characters, it only has really one core gameplay style, no matter which team you play. Every team has the same basic concept of speed, flight, and power. There are minor differences between the different types of characters, like SBO the speed type can turn invisible and always clings to walls to triangle jump, which is the coolest wall jump we've had in 3D, by the way. And Sonic can't do any of that. And Amy has an actual projectile tornado attack. So she can just stand there without even having to go to the center of the arena in the character battles. Which suck, by the way. I don't know how you're supposed to know when you first play the game that you have to go to the center and spam the tornado attack to win. If you don't know to do that, then it's going to be a giant clusterfuck. But if you know what to do, it's really not a problem at all, and it's one of my favorite bosses in the game, in fact. Bosses should be easy. The big problem with the bosses in this game is that they're just mind-numbingly boring, like with spamming the homie attack on the... I forget the names. The first boss and the Rail Canyon boss. That's all you do with multiple health bars and just spam the homie attack. And the character battles obviously suck. And there's also the robot storms, which really suck. You're just fighting the same enemies you've been fighting all game. And they can last a really long time. But yeah, about earlier, there is really only one gameplay style, and that's what makes this better than Sonic Adventure 2, in my opinion. Is that it sticks to one good gameplay style instead of constantly forcing you to switch to stupid treasure hunting that can take like 10 minutes, or forcing you to play cheap mech levels with clunky turning controls. Although, thankfully, you can actually do a physics mod on FA2 so that you can jump higher with the mech, and so like you can jump higher and move a little faster, so it feels a bit more like Gamma. And if you combine that with the Superforms code, with the Superforms mod, or have an invincibility code, you can actually sort of make the mech levels fun. You're not constantly getting cheap shotted, and you jump better. But that still doesn't make it worth it, the fact that you're constantly forced to switch to inferior gameplay styles to Sonic's, which is already gimped as all hell because of the spin dash nerf. Like, you don't really have the spin dash in Sonic Heroes, but arguably, in my opinion, what you have instead is actually better, because basically, the replacement for the spin dash in this game, I think a lot of people don't know how to use it right. What you're supposed to do is supposed to hold forwards and hold down B and release it while you're still running forwards. Don't try to use it from a standstill. That's not how it's supposed to work. You basically hold B and release it while running down a narrow speed section. Like sections of the level that are dedicated to speed. And there you go, you just burst forwards and you don't have to stand still and charge it up. It's basically the super peel out if it didn't force you to stop to charge it up. So it's what the super peel out should have been from the very beginning. There's a lot of times when I'll use the Rocket Excel just because I want to burst forwards to burst the speed. I want to move faster. And although people complain about the speed type being too fast, I honestly don't always think that. So I use the Rocket Excel all the time because I want to be faster. I use it in loop-de-loops and stuff like that. And it's barely ever killed me. Like, I can count the amount of times that the Rocket Excel's killed me on one hand. Maybe 2 times. I think those few times I was either using it in places I wasn't supposed to, or I used it by accident in a character battle, and so I flew off the tiny arena to my death. Because I was trying to use a tornado attack, and I guess I didn't jump first. I think the game, because of its stupid combat focus, it would have been better if it had other attacks for Sonic. Like, if it had the light speed attack for the speed types. Instead, you have the power type there, and like, it really does feel like the power type was just arbitrarily forced in, because most of what the power type does, you could have very easily had Sonic do. Like, the bounce attack could have been mapped to the X button, and you could have used it to break floors that are below you. And you could have just homing attacked into those flip panels rather than having to punch them. I feel like maybe the whole reason they had the multiple health bar enemies there is to try to arbitrarily justify the power type inclusion. Because they could have very easily just had a game based around just Sonic and Tails. And that would have been cool. Instead, you have Big the Cat hanging around Team Rose because you have to have a power type there. But I think this game really did suffer from the combat focus. At the very least, it does combat better than any Sonic game with combat focus because it has so many different ways of attacking the enemies. And enemies that force you to use different strategies against them, so you're not just home attacking them all the time. Like there's thunder shooting enemies. Like you have to thunder shoot flying enemies. And sometimes there are enemies that you have to stun with a thunder shoot and then use a power type attack against them. Although I really wish the game actually told you had to do that, instead of like taking until Team Dark and Team Chaotix for me to finally realize how I was supposed to handle them. I used to think those gray armored enemies were invincible except in Team Blast. And I've still never defeated those giant hammer swing enemies without Team Blast. Well, I did a few times by accident while trying to use the Team Blast building up glitch. Because your characters they're running all over the place and attacking while you're doing that glitch. And so you've gotta turn around with them constantly to avoid them falling off the cliff and stuff. Because for some reason when you switch characters, you move forwards automatically. Which can get annoying in Robot Storms where you don't want to automatically switch a character off to your death. But yeah, I think it would have been better if there wasn't a combat focus in this game. Even though it does variety the combat well, even though the enemy variety isn't great looking because they're all egg pawns and egg wizrobes, I guess, and the thunder shooting enemies. But I think it would have looked a lot better if all the enemies were badniks, because then they would have been based on different animals and been suited to the specific setting. It would have felt more like there was variety in the enemies, even if they're all just the same, like there's thunder shoot enemies, homing attacking enemies, and power type enemies. But yeah, the combat focus really shouldn't have been there. I mean, if you want to have detailed combat with that's taking advantage of the unique gameplay style, then good. But don't force it on us. Because for most of the time, it doesn't force you to attack enemies. I mean, you're rewarded for it by occasionally you can level up your character that way. It really should be like every time you defeat an enemy, your character gets experience points towards a level up. It shouldn't be randomly enemies will drop level up icons for specific characters. That's not enough of motivation for me to kill every enemy. What, better rank? I don't care about that. Ranks are arbitrary in Sonic. But yeah, they shouldn't force combat down your throat. They shouldn't have doors that only open when you defeat enemies. That's not Sonic-like. The only time I can think of it happening in the classics was in Sonic CD when you had to jump into Firefly enemies that would send lasers directly below them, and you had to jump into them from below to attack them. Yeah, that's not cheap at all. They were the real final boss of the game. But anyways, like, I agree with a lot of the criticisms about Sonic Heroes. I don't like the fact that they force you to do combat. The controls aren't supernaturally tight. Oh my god, how dare they? And, well, they complain about a kiddie tone, but there's only a few lines that are awful. Like, the ones where they say Sonic Heroes. Like, because we're Sonic Heroes. What kind of a response to Metal Sonic losing is that? And the character battle cutscenes make the story look a lot worse than it actually is. Because the character battles are just there because they were there in the adventure games. They're so sloppily written, there's no reason for any of these friends to be fighting each other. But they make up arbitrary excuses for them fighting anyways, and it's just rife with bad writing. Sonic isn't incredibly happy that Shadow is still alive, even though even a fanfiction writer would write it like that. So, yeah. And that's just one example. Why Team Chaotix try to steal cheese when they already had all 10 Chow from the previous mission? Why did Eggman send the Chaotix on missions at all? Like, that just wastes time that they could have spending all their time going to him, and he could have gotten rescued sooner. Not to mention, he was trapped in a room by Metal Sonic for 3 days in a row without food, water, or a bathroom, most importantly. So that must have really sucked for him. And the fact that Metal Sonic didn't kill Eggman implied that, well, it couldn't be that he was programmed not to be able to kill Eggman, because if that was the case, he would have also had programming preventing him from betraying him in the first place. Unless he was always intended to be his heir when he died, and so he was just able to fiddle around with his own programming somehow. It's never really explained how he got to this point. To make it so that he was allowed to betray him by becoming his heir early, basically. Like, Metal Sonic must have cared about Eggman to not kill him, and instead lock him in a room. Like, this plot definitely has plot holes in it, but that honestly isn't enough to make it bad, because this plot actually looks pretty good in hindsight compared to Colors, doesn't it? See, Heroes' story is a lighthearted 3 Sonic game done right. It's not all obnoxious about it. Like, aside from a few bad lines, for the most part, it's lighthearted, but it's subtle. And like, there's even non-lighthearted dark elements, like the whole Omega says kill and other stuff. Like, you literally control a killer robot in that game. And like, there's Team Dark, so it's basically controlling a villainous team like in SA2. Only, unlike in SA2, they're not actually villains. So again, another shallow reference to the adventure games. Just like with the fact that they have a 3-day time limit, even though it's not like it's always enforced at the beginning of every cutscene where they... Or in SA2, at the beginning of every cutscene, they would tell you how much time you had left. So they reinforce the tension of the story that way. And there's no tension when it comes to stopping Eggman's plans, because you have no reason to believe that he'll ever succeed in it. Or say Eggman, I guess Eggman came up with the plan, but Metal Sonic co-opted it. Like, the whole thing about him wanting to rule over Robot Kingdom makes no sense whatsoever. It was never even alluded to. Why would he come to that conclusion? Why would he get that as a desire? And why wouldn't, if he thinks he's the real Sonic because of a glitch, why wouldn't he just take over Sonic's life? Because you saw in Team Rose's first cutscene that he was able to disguise himself as Sonic. That's huge missed potential. Why didn't he try to take over Sonic's life then? Why didn't he at the very least frame him for something a lot worse than stealing a frog and a Chow? And for that matter, Team Rose's plot in general shouldn't have existed logically, because once Metal Sonic got a hold of the Chow and the frog for Chaos' data, which is good that they actually reference the adventure games by doing that. Like, they have an actual continuity nod to adventure games focused into the story in a mandatory way. You're never gonna see that in Sonic game ever again. But yeah, why? Like, Metal Sonic could have just gotten Chaos data from Froggy and Chocola. Some random Chow just randomly shows up, because Cream couldn't just be on the adventure because she likes Amy. Oh no. Another thing is Cream. She's proven that the advanced games are canon, because Sonic doesn't look at her and go, "Who are you?" No, he clearly knows who she is already, and she introduced herself in Advance 2, so obviously the Advance games are canon. Just some people don't want to admit that because, ooh, they're on handhelds. Handhelds are trash. But anyways, it doesn't really make any sense. Team Rose's story shouldn't have even happened, because Metal Sonic should have just gotten the Chaos data right away and then just given them back. or at least left them behind. Why did he kidnap them in the first place? It's about as nonsensical as Vanilla getting kidnapped in Advance 2. And Team Chaotix, again, their missions, which make them the big the cat of the game because of how tedious it is, constantly looking for every single thing. Like, sometimes you can miss a few, but the first mission in Team Chaotix is the hardest mission in the game, and the worst one, no doubt. Like, the Torches mission is tedious, but at least you don't, well, you can miss a few. Like, there were 3 different points where I needed to look up a guide for Team Chaotix. Hand Castle, Mystic Mansion, and the Hermit Crab mission. That's the worst part of the game. Because they're so tiny. Like, sometimes the Chaotix can give you hints about where the items to find are. They can mention that you have to do stuff, but it's still easy to just walk right past stuff and overlook stuff. I don't think that should have been a Sonic game. Sonic's about exploration, yes, but the level design is so linear that's going to naturally lead you into a lot of the items anyways. Like the Chow mission, it's really easy. So some of the missions are okay. But Team Chaotix in general is just the definition of padding. It shouldn't have been the game, it should have just been some sort of bonus mission thing that you got to play as after beating the game or something. Like, the whole concept of missions just makes no sense, because Eggman shouldn't have been telling them to waste time with that to begin with. At least Team Sonic's story makes sense. Team Dark's story is like, it's basically just a prelude to the unnecessary Shadow the Hedgehog game. I say necessary because they didn't need to give him amnesia in the first place. In fact, Shadow's amnesia feels like an afterthought, because there's a lot of lines where it implies that Shadow doesn't have amnesia. Like, he goes, "Hey look, it's that hedgehog," and Rouge doesn't even react to the fact that he clearly needs to remember who Sonic is. And he talks about how some things never change when Rouge talks about wanting to steal the Master Emerald. So it kind of feels like the amnesia thing is just an afterthought, because he barely ever mentions it at all, and sometimes he outright contradicts it. At the very least, it does show that he's objectively a hero, because the very first thing he does after escaping the cloning pod is save Rouge's life from Omega. Which makes the fact that you have a game about determining Shadow's morality come out right after it seem very unnecessary. He's already made clear he's a hero, like in all the games that he was in before that. But yeah, Heroes' plot isn't perfect, but at the very least it's not constantly shoving comedy down your throat. In fact, the comedy in the game is actually really good. Like, there are some jokes that actually make me chuckle. Like, on guard. Guard on! Get them! Like, Team Chaotix actually made me laugh there. And there's also, well, I can't really remember right now, but yeah, sometimes it can actually be a pretty charming game. Oh yeah, like, sometimes the typos in the script can be really funny. Like, looks like we're in jam, boys! Evil must die! Beware my ninja powers! And sometimes, like, I like the character banter in the sense that it kind of makes it feel more like these characters are actually together on an actual adventure together. Like, I hate it for Team Rose, wish you could turn it off, because it's a team of annoying voices. That's probably, like, it's a joke team, the easy mode mockery. I guess they must have known that the voices were so annoying, because it is the easy mode after all. But yeah, I like the character banter for the most part. I don't think the voice acting is bad at all for the most part. Like, Tails' voice sucks, but other than that, it's pretty... Tails' voice sucks, Big sucks, and Cream suck. But the voice acting itself is really good, certainly a lot better than Adventure 1. And the body language is at the best it's ever been. Like, at that point, it obviously gets better by Unleashed. Like, the presentation is really good, not that that really matters in a video game. Like, the graphics are really good. Like, honestly, it looks really great, because it's about a classic aesthetic. Like, I love the fact that Sonic Heroes is the closest there is to a 3D classic game in structure, because obviously Adventure 1 is literally just classic gameplay in 3D. Which makes me wonder why classic fanboys hate it so much, when it's literally what they want in 3D. But I love how Heroes is basically, it has like the Act 1, Act 2 structure. It's like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, where it has long levels and Act 1s and Act 2s that share aesthetic. So stuff like that. It has a boss at the end of every level, and it has a lighthearted tone until the end when things get serious. And even has Metal Sonic back, and the Chaotix from Knuckles Chaotix. I like the redesigns, especially Vector's, but I absolutely hate the fact that, one, they forgot about Mighty, although he was a Sonic clone anyways, so it doesn't really matter, I guess. And Ray definitely deserved to be forgotten, because I just hate his design. I guess it's superficial. I don't really know his personality, though. I'm sure it was pretty bland. But the point is, I don't think they should have rebooted the Chaotix. I think they should have just... There's no reason they couldn't have just kept Knuckles Chaotix canon. And it might as well be, considering that they don't look at Knuckles and go, "Who are you?" And Knuckles doesn't look at them and go, "Who are you guys?" I mean, Team Dark suspects them of being evil, so clearly they're obscure in that sense. But Team Dark wasn't really famous enough to be not aware. Like, Team Sonic doesn't not recognize Team Chaotix. Like, even though they're new characters, no one really needs to be introduced to them. They're never saying, "I'm Espio, I'm Vector," stuff like that. So even though they're new, it's not really that big of a deal. It's just like with Cubot and Orbot, it's like they were always there. Which is good, because they should have always been there. They're good characters, I guess. They're a comedy trio. I think they don't really feel like enough of a family. They bicker too much, so they're kind of, I don't know. Espio's boring, Charmy's annoying, and Vector is kind of adult. Although he does figure out that Eggman was the one giving them the orders, but that just makes everyone else look like a complete moron because they weren't able to figure out the obvious. It seems very out of character for Espio to be fooled. Charmy I can get, but... And another thing is, why did Charmy not know who Eggman was? Why was he all like, "Doctor Who?" How can anyone not know who Eggman is? But yeah, the story isn't perfect, but at least it's not being obnoxious about its lightheartedness. I think if the lighthearted break after 06 was like Heroes, instead of like Colors trying to be funny in a Sonic game, I think it would have been a lot better well received. There's a few moments of corniness, like with the superpower of teamwork, but for the most part, it's a great tone and a great story. Like, there's some plot holes, but other than that, the only really bad writing is in the character battles that shouldn't have existed in the first place. Well, the bosses were easy, so I appreciate that. But, yeah. It's a really good game. I'm glad I've played it. I don't know why people say it's a generic platformer when you can fly around, do all this cool stuff with the power type. I guess I talked about level design, but it has action set pieces. What kind of generic platformer has action set pieces? Yeah, I'm glad I got to play it. I like it more than Adventure 2, which I grew up on, so that says a lot. I'm not sure if I like it more than Adventure 1 though, because I just like taking shortcuts in that game with Sonic and Tails so much. And I think the ideal 3D Sonic game would be a lot more like Adventure, but Heroes was a good diversion. Like, it was a good, unique gameplay style. I don't know if they should go back to that. Like, that should be the ideal 3D Sonic formula, but it is really good. It's a good attempt. It just seems inherently misaimed that it's all about, the whole marketing was about bringing classic fans, like being a better bridge between the Adventure era and the Adventure era. A better bridge between the Adventure era and the Classic era. But the problem is that with such a complicated gameplay style that has so many different mechanics you have to learn, if someone who only played the classic games tried to play Heroes, they would hate it. And I've seen evidence of that myself. So, having such a complicated gameplay style, then having a more classic marketed game, it feels very confusing and misaimed in the marketing.
And then we come to the second Dark Age of Sonic. I call it second Dark Age because technically Sonic already had a Dark Age after Sonic 3 Knuckles, but before Sonic Adventure. But it just wasn't as pronounced because the bad games mostly were spin-offs or like Game Gear games and stuff. So nobody really cared about them. But with 3D games, it was a lot more significant, so people just act like it's the only Dark Age that existed until Boom came out. Some people think that the Dark Age started with Heroes, but again, a lot of people thought Heroes wasn't as good as SE2. It was still a good game, at least. The Shadow the Hedgehog game is where things started falling apart. The controls were pretty terrible, like you were always jumping around to make sure you wouldn't fall off the edge because you would slip and slide everywhere. Like he controlled like he was on ice, and I'm guessing it was because of the whole rocket booster shoe thing, but still. There's also the mission-based structure of the game, where there were all sorts of different missions. Like you had to kill every single monster in the level, and if you didn't do that, then you failed. Thankfully, they introduced a checkpoint system where you can warp between checkpoints to make it more convenient backtracking. You know, I think every Sonic game should do that. Every video game should do that. But unfortunately, like at least you could skip the most annoying missions, like the Artificial Chaos one, but that usually requires like replaying missions you already played. A lot of people like to take the neutral path by just going straight to the goal ring for every level. And that's good, you know, that's how it should be. Like, I think Shadow the Hedgehog would have been improved if they had a hub world and you could go to different areas of the hub world to do dark or hero or neutral missions. And all those missions would just be go to the goal ring, but they would have different levels. I think that would have actually been a lot better. And like you would justify it as you talking to different characters to enlist different missions. They have this kind of confusing plot with the whole branching pathways thing because it's evil or good, you decide. But the problem is that the plot becomes incoherent because it relies on, well, for one, Black Doom just randomly warping Shadow all over the place, messing with his Chaos control. So he just sort of randomly shows up in certain areas, but more importantly, it doesn't really feel like there's any proper consequences to your actions. And this leads me into one of the biggest problems I have with Shadow's story. It tries too hard to be edgy and doesn't try hard enough to be dark and thus emotionally compelling, like it could have been. Because there are no real consequences and no real dwelling on actions. Like, you can be a wild card betraying the heroes all game and they'll still ask you for help in the missions. It would have been more compelling if they distrusted you for betraying them and helping Black Doom. But they don't. And Black Doom always acts as if you never betrayed him. Like, he's always nagging Shadow to help him like a senile old man who just keeps on forgetting that he betrayed him. So, it's stupid. Like, it feels like your decision doesn't actually matter. In a game based around evil or good, you decide, there's no reason to be evil. Gun is very clearly shown as good but misguided. So there's no reason to understand why Shadow would turn against humanity again. Like, sure, Black Doom shows him what the humans did to him in the past, but we don't see very many examples of humanity being evil other than that. Like, there's so many missed opportunities for this plot. Like, we could have seen how Maria's death affected Eggman. Not just Shadow, but Eggman. And we could have seen Eggman's relationship with Gerald. Like, there's so little that we actually learn about Gerald. You'd think that the grandfather, the main villain of the series, would have more importance than that, but no. Like, one of the whole reasons the game was made was to fill in plot holes that SE2 had. But it kind of failed at doing that, because the only thing it explained was why the Eclipse Cannon was made in the first place, when, like, wouldn't it have taken a long time for Gerald to find out about Maria's death and rush to build it to destroy the world? Like, I think he would have gotten captured before he finished it, so he had to have built the Eclipse Cannon for a different purpose. And this game explains that. It explains that he built the Eclipse Cannon in order to destroy the black comet that the aliens lived on. And I'm not really a fan of aliens as Sonic, because it's too sci-fi. Like, Sonic has always been a mixture of sci-fi and fantasy, with Eggman being a engineering genius and all, but still. Especially since the aliens in this game look really terrible. Like, they look so dark and black. I don't remember what they look like. They have such forgettable designs. At least the Wisps actually look like they belong in a Sonic game. Even if, again, they're aliens, so they don't really fit. And no one calls them out on that. Same goes for Sonic Chronicles. I don't really think the aliens in that game suit Sonic either. It's just Mass Effect the Sonic game. But anyways, they explain that Shadow was made from Black Doom's blood. But all this does is really explain why his fur is black and red. And explains why Black Doom is able to control him, debilitate him, although he magically overcomes that later somehow. And it explains why Black Doom is so insistent on it working for him to take over the world and use humanity as fuel for some reason. It explains 3 things, one of which is extremely minor from SE2, and 2 of which are things that were just introduced for this game. What they should have done for Shadow's backstory was explain that he was created from the hedgehog DNA of Sonic's ancestor, like his grandfather. That would perfectly explain why Shadow has all of Sonic's abilities, as well as a few extra ones thrown in. But instead of that, instead of filling in the plot hole about how he's not a lizard like the Bio Lizard is, instead they just make him a Black Arms related person, and you just wonder why he doesn't look like the Black Arms aliens. So it's just kind of convoluted. I don't agree with people saying it's a retcon, because a retcon kind of by definition means that you're erasing something, taking something out. And no, this isn't really a retcon, this is just adding to the lore. It's not necessarily adding in a positive way, but it is technically developing on what was before. They never explicitly said in SA2 Shadow is not a Black Arms alien. They never explicitly said that he was not related to Black Doom, because Black Doom didn't even exist. But yeah, one of the biggest problems I have with Shadow's plot is that it makes Shadow look like a complete moron. And I'm not even a big Shadow fan. I find it boring because he barely expresses any emotion at all. I only really liked his character in SE2 because he was such an awesome villain, and had a tragic backstory that made him actually a well-rounded and sympathetic character rather than just villain for the sake of a villain. Like, I'm not even a big Shadow fan, but even I find it very annoying how he's such a moron in this game. He's just bumbling around, letting himself be manipulated by Black Doom. Like, if he knows about my past, then like it or not, I have to believe him. A lot of people didn't like that line. I mean, it was technically smart of him to trust him because he did know about his past. He did show him his past. That brings up the question of why he didn't just ask his friends about his past. But I'm guessing Rouge didn't want him to find out about his tragic backstory and want to destroy humanity again. They should have explained that though. And another thing is that Shadow would just have to take their word for it. That's how his past was. How is he supposed to know that the jewel thief he's friends with, and of course the more trustworthy the other friends of his, how's he supposed to trust that they're telling him the truth? Shadow's untrusting like that, which makes sense because of his past. So it makes sense that he would want to recover the memories for himself. Like, actually see the memories, not just be told about it. But again, they should have explained that. The whole Shadow amnesia plot never should have been existed in the first place. It's just a dumb excuse for Shadow to have his own game, which wasn't really necessary. There's no reason they couldn't have built in the plot holes in like a passing line in Heroes or something. I don't know. Well, I guess it did kind of need to exist, but anyways, like, the biggest problem I have with the cutscenes is that it ruins Shadow's character, making him look like such a moron. He's so easily manipulated when he was the one doing all the manipulating in SA2. He was so cunning at manipulating Eggman. Now, like, a lot of people, most of the problems that people have with the game are that it tries too hard to be edgy. Now, for the most part, I'm fine with well, not fine with, but I can understand how they make sense in universe, the edgy elements.
Now, I don't understand why Shadow would reuse vehicles. Like, the motorcycle looks cool, and I can understand his personality. He wants to be cool. Like, he wants to be intimidating so that people won't mess with him. So it makes sense that he would use a motorcycle. The problem is that he can run faster than all those vehicles. Plus, the vehicles suck in gameplay anyway. For the swearing, yeah, swearing doesn't really belong in Sonic when you think about it. I have a sneaking suspicion that if swearing was in the Archie comics, a lot more people would be fine with it. I mean, it literally was. I mean, Scourge, the Hedgehog, swore. It's just that his swearing was like random symbols for censorship purposes. But he still swore, and that made sense for his character. Practically everyone who swears in this game, it makes sense for their character. It makes sense in universe for them to swear. SBO has always been edgy. Evil must die. Beware my ninja powers. That was a literal line that he said. It makes sense for Shadow to swear because he's a teenager who wants people to be intimidated by him. It fits his character. It doesn't fit Sonic's character though, because I don't think Sonic would say, "Damn, they got away." And like every time Shadow gets hit, he says, "Damn it." Now I would be a lot more fine with that if he said other things as well as "damn it." Like if he had multiple different voice clips for getting hit, but instead he always says that every time he gets hit, and it makes it feel kind of forced. But like it would be a lot worse if in Sonic Colors every time Sonic got hit he said "Baldy McNose hair." I mean, it would be funny at first, but then you'll get really tired of it. So I don't think the swearing is nearly as bad as like the whole baldy nose hair and other extremely childish like toilet humor jokes and colors. Like there's the thing, like Shadow's plot is basically a Naked Gun movie. It's a dumb action movie, and the whole thing is that Sonic as a concept was heavily inspired by action movies. So at the very least makes a lot more sense for this game to have an action movie plot than turning itself into a sitcom that's all about the comedy, when not everybody is going to find the jokes funny, which makes the plot inherently alienating. Like, this plot is alienating too. Like, just because Color's tone is shit doesn't mean that this tone is good either. Like, this is like a Naked Gun movie. Like, if this was more dark of a plot, Shadow would have thought a lot harder about destroying all the Black Arms aliens at once with the Eclipse Cannon, which they couldn't have possibly destroyed at the end of SE2 in the Hero's story ending, because Shadow needed to use it. And I don't think Gun would have repaired it. But my point is, like, Shadow would have dwelled on the moral implications of destroying an entire species, rather than just doing it, like an action movie. And another thing is, like you destroyed an entire city as one of the dark missions, but everyone was evacuated just in time. Oh, those poor buildings! Why did they have to be destroyed? Doesn't really have the same ring to it. And there's also an annoying mission in the game where you try to assassinate the president by destroying his plane, but he manages to be just fine. No real consequences for the story. Which makes sense. Like, another major problem with the story is that they never explain what's canon and what isn't. Even a throwaway line from the side characters in the last story explaining what Shadow did to help them would have done a lot towards establishing what's canon. But instead, you just wonder what happened. I like to think that everything is basically canon. Like, it went from dark to neutral to hero. Like, at first Shadow trusted Black Doom, but then he became more neutral as the heroes gradually forgave him. And then he became a hero and tried to stop Black Doom. Like, that makes a lot more sense. Of course it's canon that Shadow helped Team Chaotix, because the whole thing that Team Chaotix was trying to do the whole game was make it so that Gerald Robotnik's whole speech to Shadow about the Black Doom was broadcasted throughout the entire world. And I'm sure they didn't mean for it to be broadcast across the entire world, but, you know, it did lead to that event. But anyways, what I was going to say was, okay, the swearing kind of makes sense. Like, the human characters and the grizzled military commander, it makes sense for them to swear. In general, the swearing makes sense. I'm not superficial enough to say that they shouldn't be swearing just because of the way they look. Like, just because they look like cartoon characters doesn't mean they should be deprived of good writing characterization in a general sense. I don't think that swearing counts as good characterization stuff, obviously. I don't think they needed to have swearing in this game at all. I think the whole edginess thing is way overblown. At least this game still remembers that this is a franchise that was meant to be cool. So, you know, it tries to be cool. Doesn't really work. It's all about making Shadow look cool, but he was already cool to begin with. So this just kind of comes off as trying too hard, like especially with Shadow with the guns. Why couldn't Shadow have just threw Chaos Spears? I don't think Shadow would use a gun considering that Maria was shot by one right in front of him. Wouldn't he be terrified of guns like Batman? Wouldn't he hate them? Like another thing, terrified. Like, if this plot was dark, we would have Shadow having PTSD from his past. Instead, he just remembers what happened to Maria and says, "That gruesome image." And he's just serious and confused. If Shadow had PTSD, he would be scared thinking about his past. And he would get hysterical and think that it was happening again. But he doesn't. So, that's not really a dark plot then. Like, it's dark in the sense that it's an alien invasion, and so you got a dark and grim, boring-looking color palette, and aliens constantly attacking the city. I don't like the huge focus on human characters we don't care about, like the president constantly worrying about the city and country being attacked by aliens. But, like, if this plot was really dark, you wouldn't have all of these lighthearted elements, like the lighthearted side characters who are genre savvy enough to realize that everything's going to be just fine. Like, you would have Amy and Vector and Charmy and every other lighthearted character in the plot be all depressed because of the alien invasion, and something really bad would happen to Cream to get the audience's sympathy. But nothing like that ever happens. Instead, Sonic is just as lighthearted as he always was. Sonic is lighthearted, Charmy's lighthearted, Vector is lighthearted, Amy's lighthearted, Cream is lighthearted. Basically every side character we see is lighthearted. In fact, this game actually has jokes that make me laugh more than Colors does. You have Charmy, Vector, and Espio trying to get a portal to cyberspace to appear. Like, Espio's like, at this rate the whole day would be wasted. And Charmy says, yeah! Whole day wasted! I always laugh when I hear that line. Like, I don't know, just something about it is pretty charming. And it comes from Charmy, of course. And I like how, like, Shadow would just karate chop the computer and somehow that would make it work. And then Charmy does the same thing again, and you'd expect a subversion where it doesn't work and Charmy looks like a fool. But instead, it actually happens. It's also kind of funny how you have this space shuttle with elevator shafts that can be operated by a little girl. A little girl who's dying of having no immune system at that. Like, again, why did the game just explain that Maria had NIDS? And that the whole reason Shadow was created in the first place was to get a cure for Maria. They could have shown Maria suffering from NIDS. They could have shown how the disease was affecting her physically and emotionally. That would have created a lot more sympathy for her and made her death a lot more tragic. We already knew that she was a sweet little girl. We didn't need to be shown it. We needed to be shown that she had a disease that Shadow needed to cure. You're telling me that guns and violence is not bad enough to be censored out? But Maria having a disease, oh no. That's something we can only learn from Sonic Battle. Like, there's just so much missed opportunities with the plot. I don't think the guns were necessary. I don't think the swearing was necessary, but not the end of the world. Because it was only in character for everyone to do it. I don't think the vehicles were necessary. And I didn't really like the alien invasion plot either, like, at all. But I think people are overblowing it and acting like the edgy elements were the only thing wrong with the story. And it just wasn't. Like, I can understand why Shadow would be dumb enough to trust Black Doom, in the sense that he was only a week old when he was ejected from the Ark. So he's kind of young, don't you think? Like obviously he was created 50 years ago, but he was in stasis for most of his life. So it doesn't really matter that he existed for 50 years. He doesn't have 50 years of experience. If anything, he has like barely a week of experience. Of course he would be easily manipulated. Just because you can easily manipulate people doesn't mean you're immune to being manipulated yourself. But even though there's justification, they never explain that justification, and that's not enough for me to not be annoyed just watching the cutscenes. It doesn't help that this is the game that introduced the 4Kids voice cast, and having models from Heroes with the 4Kids voice cast is very jarring and off-putting. I think it would have gone over a little bit better if they replaced the voice cast starting with the next generation of consoles rather than Shadow, you know? But yeah, I think I've talked enough about the game.
And then there's 06, the game that nearly killed the franchise. But you know what it did kill? The adventure game formula. Now, a lot of people like to say that there isn't a formula. I think there is. It's multiple playable characters. And rather than having the boosts, they have, like, the spin dash jump for taking shortcuts. Although I say that, but 06 doesn't really let you jump out of the spin dash. But it's still clearly an adventure game. So I guess multiple playable characters and not having the boost and drift and other stuff. That makes it an adventure game, in my book. And because of that, because of the 06 reception, this scared Sega away from making any game with the positive elements of the adventure games. It's because of 06 that they threw the baby out with the bathwater and led to something completely new, which was fantastic for gameplay, horrible for story writing. The game is very slow and boring, and it has way too much emphasis on forced combat. Now, I was able to put up with that in Heroes, mostly because of the whole Team Blast mechanic. Really made things a lot easier. But yeah, all the characters are too slow. It's not very well programmed. It's like Sonic 4 because the speed is all about scripted sequences, and that's it. It's mainly about the platforming, but the controls are so bad that it's kind of difficult to even do that. It's not bad in the sense of the boost games where you move way too fast and it's stiff and awkward and weird. I don't know. I played the PC 06 demo and the acceleration was like Amy Rose, where you would constantly end up stopping when you didn't want to, and you couldn't keep momentum for the life of you. But I heard that Sonic was more weighty in that demo, and in the actual game, he's not. I don't know. I've never really played the game, so I can't give it the full vitriol and hatred that it deserves. Clement's review does a much better job with showing off everything bad about the game. Although there is one point I heavily disagree on. The point where he goes on a rant about how Sonic is a cartoon. I always roll my eyes at that. Yes, it is a cartoon character, but that doesn't mean good writing and characterization should be sacrificed because of it. Yes, Sonic shouldn't be realistic because it uses magic all the time, like Sonic runs at the speed of sound. If it was realistic, you wouldn't have any of that. But realistic and dark or not lighthearted tone are two completely different things. Like in general, I guess I prefer for lighthearted, but not cartoony and to the point of making me embarrassed to be watching it. And it just still gets serious and have a sense of stakes, you know? The Adventure 1 did it perfectly. But my point is, the main, like, all the problems with 06 have basically already been talked about, which is why I kind of, like I get it, it's so bad that it makes sense that people still talk about it to this day. It makes sense that it's still joked about. I hate how it completely ruined the reputation of the series among mainstream gamers. I mean, regular Joes still sort of know who Sonic is, or at least, well, regular Joes think that he died in the 90s, which is weird. Really weird. Like, a lot of people still like the series, even people who aren't Sonic fans. But really, the plot of the game is really complicated, but not in a way that's hard to understand. It's more in the sense that it has time travel in it. And I hate time travel in stories. See, all 3 of the stories of the game have problems that could have been solved within seconds by just having Chaos Control time travel them. All 3 of the character stories, all 3 of those goals, fighting Mephiles, saving Elise, and saving the future, all of those 3 goals could have been accomplished by time traveling to the right place. Like, the plot seemed to be building up to Shadow and Silver time traveling so that Mephiles and Iblis were never created. It seemed to be building up to that when they traveled to the point where he was created, but instead, Shadow just takes the Scepter of Darkness and tries to imprison him again in the future, in the present, I mean. And Silver, he doesn't go back in time to stop that. In fact, he just leaves the blue Chaos Emerald with Elise as a child, even though Sonic needs to use that emerald to go super, and he had no problem doing that over and over again. It's just confusing. Like, there's a lot of plot holes in the story. In general, I really appreciate how it tries. Like, it tries, and that alone makes me respect it. It's very engaging, and there are a lot of things that, like, I felt so bad for Silver with this whole post-apocalyptic future, like, backstory. I first saw the game in PokeCaptain's Let's Play, which is actually the first Let's Play I ever watched, and probably is the reason that I started doing post-commentaries to begin with. Because of PokeCaptain's LP, that was my first experience with any Sonic game past Sonic Advance, and past Adventure 2. And the 4Kids voice cast. But anyways, like, I appreciate how it has emotional impact in the sense that it makes you feel sorry for Silver for his tragic future. Although I kind of think that the post-apocalyptic wasteland idea is too dark. And it's not even used to its full potential because you never actually see the people of the future and how they live. For all you know, it's just Silver and Blaze, and they're just delusional about other people existing. So it kind of loses that impact. Like, I don't think of it as the world where Station Square existed. I think of it as the world that Silver lives in. And for that matter, why is Blaze even there? They could have easily explained it as Blaze coming from the Soul Dimension to Silver's future and helping him. But instead, they try to act as if Blaze was a childhood friend. Although they never actually explicitly say that. Not once, actually. Like, they imply that she's been helping Silver for quite some time, but they never, at any point, explicitly say that Blaze is from the future. The confusing thing is she says Blue Hedgehog, as if she doesn't actually, as if she knows who Sonic is, but is still too stupid to realize that he's innocent and he's not the Iblis Trigger. I think the weird thing is that in the Japanese version, blue and naive mean the same thing. Like, they have the same word in Japanese. So she basically said naive hedgehog. And so she could have been calling Silver naive, which makes you wonder why she didn't just tell Silver that Mephiles was tricking him. I guess she was just really desperate for a way to save the future and travel to the past. Even if Sonic necessarily wasn't the one. Like, it's weird. Do you think that Silver's future would have records of Sonic being a hero? Although I guess they would have been destroyed. Like, Silver lives in a post-apocalyptic world. How is he supposed to know what obviously evil was? How is he supposed to know that Mephiles was evil? Like, just looking at him. Like, even the word Mephiles the Dark could just mean to him Mephiles the guy who really hates Iblis. Because dark is the opposite of light, and light would be associated most with Iblis. I hate hindsight reasoning and storytelling. The other major problem with 06's plot, besides the time travel, is the whole Princess Elise, a human, is involved in an epic romance with Sonic the Hedgehog. Which is kind of weird. Well, kind of. More like extremely weird. I don't hate Elise. I hate the fact that she's involved in this romance. Fun fact, the person who wrote Sonic's story in 06 was a woman. Which actually explains a lot, and that's coming from me, a woman. But yeah, I don't really think it belongs to Sonic. the biggest reason I don't think it belongs to Sonic is mainly because it's a human and a hedgehog. Like, in the Archie comics, you have romance in the sense that it's constantly chipping Sonic and Sally. Or it was before the reboot. But the reboot doesn't really count, so whatever. Like, I don't know, Sonic is about action, not really about Sonic bonding with this princess and teaching her how great friendship is and getting her out on an adventure, getting her to be excited, opening up, which is heartwarming, but also kind of a bit too laid back. Like, it's weird, Sonic has the more feminine type of story, when you think that would be the case with Silver. Like, Shadow has the manly story because he's the one actually getting things done. He's the main character of the story, not Sonic. Shadow is the one fighting Mephiles. Shadow is the one who fights Iblis and Mephiles. Sonic is just fighting Iblis at one point because he happens to be there. And Shadow is fighting him at the same time, so... Like, the only reason Sonic ever fought Solaris at all was because he happened to be there in the last story, after he got revived from the dead by Elise kissing him with the power of the Chaos Emeralds. Which was, obviously, something that I always look away from. At least it was really brief and was obscured by a flash of light right away. I don't see why she had to kiss him. Like, aside from the whole, it was being an epic romance drama, which again, I don't really see the point of. Even if Elise was a Mobian, which would probably make her more competent and less likely to get kidnapped because she'd have powers to be more durable and stuff. Like, she can't help getting kidnapped. She's a sheltered princess. Why would she have combat skills? And she's a human. The only special power she's been shown to have is when Sonic is carrying Elise, she creates a fire shield around herself that can technically attack enemies, except it doesn't extend out far enough, so you just get hit by enemies when you run into them. And more importantly, it lets you float over water, so you can run over water and fiery sand. Or, like, not fiery sand, I'm thinking of Generations. The sand you sink through. As if you just clip through the floor. Yeah, it's weird. But anyways, like, the princess can't really help getting kidnapped. It just feels extremely repetitive how she gets kidnapped over and over and over again. She's definitely a lot more likable than Peach. She's a normal person rather than a stuck-up royal. Like, even though she's sheltered, she's still a nice person and not really spoiled. Like, she cares about the people. She seems pretty nice. Like, I don't hate Elise. I just hate the writing around her, with it being an epic romance. Like with her selfishly saying, I don't care what happens to the world, when she was just about to blow out the flame of Solaris to make it so that Mephiles and Iblis would never be created, and thus she wouldn't meet Sonic. And so they wouldn't get involved. Well, they never really got involved in the story. Like, they were just friends. Like, it was strongly implied that Elise had a crush on him for some reason, even though they're not proportioned correctly to each other, and so it can't work. But Sonic wasn't exactly wildly a character proclaiming his love to her the entire time. Like he was kind of, if anything, kind of, I don't know, bashful about her have kind of a crush on him. I wouldn't say bashful either, just kind of shocked. I don't know. Like I love how Shadow is portrayed. Like how Shadow basically redeems himself after looking like a complete moron in Shadow the Hedgehog. He gets to be the hero of his own story. He stands up to Mephiles when Mephiles tries to get him to join him, like Black Doom. Like, Mephiles tries to prove to him that people sealed him away in the future because he was too powerful, and they blamed him for things going wrong. Like, they showed Shadow being nailed to a cross, which I never really saw the cross when I saw the cutscenes so much. Like, all I saw was the cross, the diamond-shaped red force field around it. I couldn't even see Shadow in there at all, so I wasn't really sure what it was. It's not very good cutscene imagery. But anyways, I just love how Shadow basically shows his character development by not joining Mephiles. And
the thing is that, unfortunately, his fighting Mephiles is pointless because Mephiles just creates an army of clones over and over again. He can't beat him because he just breaks out of the scepter and just creates armies of clones. He can only beat him when he becomes Solaris. So he's invincible in his Mephiles form, but not in his all-powerful time and space transcending form? That's arbitrary. Like, a lot of the times the plot just goes the way it does because the writers want it to. None of the characters use time travel in smart ways because the writers don't want them to. Like, Sonic could have easily solved the Elise problem by just warping with Chaos Control so that she was on the other side of the world so Eggman couldn't get to her. So like putting her with Gun, where she'd be safe. Then he could just go back to Soliana and fight Eggman. Like, the Soliana was being run just fine without her, so she was only a figurehead. She was clearly just there. Like her not being there just lowered morale. And even then the civilians didn't seem all that worked up. So why didn't Sonic just do that? Not to mention the fact that with Silver, his telekinesis is awesome, but it's also so overpowered that he needs to be made to act stupid and out of character in order to not make the plot be done in 2 seconds. Like one of the reasons he didn't kill Sonic immediately was that he was stalling because of his conscience. He didn't really want to be a killer. That's why I liked Silver, that he's a good person and he's well-meaning. He's naive and socially awkward, but well-meaning. But he doesn't kill Sonic right away because he hesitates and because Sonic's friends save him. Amy one time and Shadow another time. I can understand him not doing anything to Amy because he grew attached to her. Like, that's the thing. He spends time with Amy because that's a really good way of getting him to realize what he's really fighting for. He gets to appreciate the world that isn't ruined by Iblis. Like, he appreciates a desert of all things. Like, that shows him what he's fighting for. It makes his coming to the conclusion, it makes him more natural. Like, later he wonders if it's right to kill someone to save the world. I guess him progressing to that point is more natural because of Amy. But anyways, it makes sense that he wouldn't right away use his full powers against Amy. I don't understand why Sonic would just leave, like, Amy with him. I guess he just has a lot of faith in her to talk him down, because she talked down Shadow. But still, like, how does Sonic know that Silver isn't just going to kill her? I don't know. But my point is, why didn't Silver just use his full powers against Shadow and win instantly? The whole reason he won so quickly against Sonic was because he telekinetically grabbed him and threw him to the wall. Why didn't he just do that with Shadow? Shadow is just as fast as Sonic. At least he has the 2 anyways. And sure, he has extra chaos powers, but still. He's still basically a Sonic clone, so Silver should have just grabbed him telekinetically and won against him too. It kind of makes Shadow look like a Gary Stu winning against Silver. I mean, it makes sense that he would be able to stop time and kick him in the back of the head, which was a pretty satisfying moment. Very genre-savvy. You don't really see that in stories. Especially not when they don't break the fourth wall to be very smug about how genre-savvy and how brilliant the writers were at making the characters look genre-savvy. OS didn't really do that, which was good. But yeah, just, I don't know. I don't really like the plot of 06 in the sense that it's kind of stupid. It's kind of full of plot holes because of the time travel and Elise. But it introduced a lot of cool concepts like Silver and Mephiles. I like that. Like, there's a lot of things that are great about it, but there's also kind of some confusing things. Like, how do you, like, they never made it clear what exactly the rules were with Iblis getting out of Elise. If Elise dies, does that release Iblis? Like, regardless of whether she cries or not? Because they try to imply that Elise died upon the Eggman's battleship crashing. So I'm assuming we're supposed to believe that she cried because of that, and that's what caused Silver's future. But the thing is, though, that okay, if her dying is what released Iblis, then sealing Iblis in her just delays the inevitable. It would have been a lot smarter to just put a lease on Pluto so that when Iblis finally got out of her, it wouldn't actually hurt any innocent people. I mean, of course, they wouldn't really want to do that to her right away because she's the princess, and so a lot of people like her. So they would feel a lot better about just keeping her around, letting her have a happy life, and I guess waiting until she's really old to send her to the moon. I don't know. I don't understand why the Duke didn't just seal Iblis inside of him, and like he would die and Iblis would be kept in him. It would never have a reason to get released because he'd never cry. But if that must be how Iblis works, where it releases after you die. Because otherwise, the Duke would have sealed inside of him. Unless he was the only one who could steal Iblis inside of people, because like he had the Chaos Emerald and he could say the chant that would seal Solaris into people. I don't know why he couldn't just teach that to Silver. I mean, Silver was able to do it and seal Iblis inside of Blaze, who disappeared for no reason whatsoever, and that made Silver's future nice again. Although it's already ruined, so having a blue sky doesn't really fix anything. Like, we never actually saw people rejoicing after that happened, and Solaris happened right afterwards, so it rendered everything completely pointless. I don't know why Silver didn't just go back with Sonic, like, after Radical Train to make sure that he wouldn't screw up. Well, not Radical Train, and I forget. After Kingdom Battle, right. Yeah, it's just kind of confusing as all. Like, technically the Duke of Soliana is the Iblis trigger because he created Solaris he didn't create Solaris, but he created Nephilis and Iblis from it in a noble effort to revive his dead wife. So why didn't Silver just make sure he'd never be born or something? I guess, like, at the very least, show him photographic evidence of the consequences of his experiment. If he had done that, then he would have saved his future without having to kill anyone. Like, the plot was not thought out very well, but they still tried, at least. I think I've talked way too much about this, so let's move on, because a whole bunch of other people have already talked way too much about this as it is. And after 06 were storybook games, like, well, Black Knight came after Sonic Unleashed, but they're all basically the same thing. Basically had the same problem. Motion control sucked and could go die in fire. Black Knight was definitely a lot better, but it was basically just a beat 'em up that Sonic was in. The pace was very stop and go. It was basically just like it had no flow whatsoever. You could just constantly do the spin slash, but that would drain your soul gauge until you wouldn't be able to take advantage of its opportunities. Like, both of the games, like, the level design in Secret Rings is awful, didn't probably take advantage of the fact that you were stuck on rails moving forwards the whole time. And, like, you even had a break button. So, sometimes you'd be forced to defeat enemies to progress, when you couldn't just homie attack and then aim your homie attacks to left and right to defeat the enemies. You had to do it one at a time. It was really awkward. And you constantly run into a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, they just weren't really good at all. What's interesting about them is that their stories. The stories are basically written how you'd expect, considering that Secret Rings was about Sonic being pulled into the Arabian Nights story. And so, the story is more emotional, more focused on emotional impact. Like, you feel sorry for Shara, the genie, because apparently she was the abused girlfriend of Eraser Jin, the main villain, and I think that's a bit too real for Sonic. Even though she's a constant annoyance the whole game, she's constantly bickering with Sonic and telling him not to be his adventurous self, you still feel sorry for her when she gets killed and Sonic has to save her life. Like, you still feel really sorry for her. So they did that well. They did emotional impact well, just The cutscenes aren't very action-packed, and it doesn't help that they're all in still image comic book form, because they really cheaped out on the cutscenes for the storybook games. Like, you could tell the B team made them, but the B team also made Colors. And Colors had real cutscenes. Well, real. I'll get to that. Black Knight's story, on the other hand, was a lot more action-packed, a lot more manly. It was a lot about exciting action, like Knuckles sees a dragon, he wants to punch it in the face. So it's basically the perfect tone for the Sonic series. It's basically what the Sonic story should be. There are a few major problems with it, though. Like, I don't like how Knuckles tries to literally kill himself after Sonic beats him in a fight, because he's a knight and he failed. Even though that's what samurai do. That's what samurai do. Like, if Knuckles was a knight and he was defeated, it would be more customary for him to just do him a favor. Not that. At least Sonic acts pretty in character to it, though. Like, still treating him like his rival, you know, but still telling him not to. But I don't like how Sonic is always lecturing the knights who've been raised to be knights their whole lives, presumably, on the proper way to be a knight. That there's more to being a knight than just following a king. Like, the instant he picks up a sword, he's instantly an expert at it. Granted, it's a sword. I mean, how much skill does it require? Like, you just swing it around. I don't see how that requires skill. Like, I guess there's a danger of hurting yourself with it, but come on. I guess he is doing some pretty fancy maneuvers, like jumping and spinning around, though. But still, it's not too impressive, you know? It's not like he's like wielding nunchucks, the most stupidest weapon in existence, because you can so easily hurt yourself with them. The point is, Sonic is a Gary Stu in that game because he's all about, like in Sonic and the Secret Rings, when he had dick moments, he was called out for them. Like, when he tried to leave Knuckles to die in a cage, which he didn't do in Triple Trouble, by the way. I guess he's just gotten fed up with him betraying him. But Chara called him out on it. In Black Knight, nobody calls him out on it. You'd think that Caliburn, his annoying talking sword helper, who's constantly bickering with him the whole game, is just there to have Sonic have someone to argue with. You'd think that Caliburn would be telling him to show Lancelot respect. But no. So, Sonic just comes off as a Gary Stu. And I love Merlina. I love Merlina as a character. She's the best villain since Shadow in SA2. Like, she actually has a sympathetic motive, a backstory, an actual reason for her being a villain. She wants the kingdom not to end. I don't see how that's evil at all. The problem is that Sonic acts as if that is evil, and not the fact that she's using the demonic forces of the underworld to take over the kingdom. He should be focusing on that, but instead he's all like, what good is a world that goes on forever? That sounds pretty lame. It's not like he... Imagine if he said that at the end of SA2 when the planet was about to be destroyed. What good is a world that goes on forever? That sounds pretty lame. He's such a hypocrite in that game. Sonic is not really about, like, Sonic is not really, he should not be used arguing against people who have big statements to make, you know? He's about inspiring the audience. When he tries to make arguments in philosophical debates, he just makes everything about him. He just makes everything about himself. It sounds very immature. So I could not stand seeing Merlina being portrayed as a villain because I was so confused. I guess she was too sympathetic because it was so obvious that she wasn't doing anything wrong aside from the whole underworld minions thing, which would have destroyed the kingdom. So she was creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. How could she be so stupid as to think that was smart? Also, the whole there's never a King Arthur thing is really confusing considering that the knights have been serving under him, presumably their whole lives, so you think that they would notice. Like, you see Blaze at the beginning say that the king changed, which implies that the king was replaced by the illusion that her grandfather conjured up. But instead, she's like there was never one at all, and then it's revealed that Sonic was actually King Arthur. Which is stupid because Sonic's not even from that book. So how could he be the King Arthur? Not to mention that he has to abandon the book and thus abandon his duties as king because he lives in another world. So I think it would have been a lot better for Tails in that book universe to be King Arthur, because it would fit in with the Camelot ideal of the hard-working man becoming king. I talked way too long about these stories, I apologize. As for Unleashed, it's amazing. I love the boost gameplay where it's basically the most thrilling Sonic has ever been. Granted it took a lot for me to get used to the controls and the way the gameplay was. The biggest problem with adjusting to the boost gameplay is easily that you have to get into the mindset that you need to drift when you're coming out to walls and stuff. It took me the longest time, like a few levels I guess, for me to finally figure out that I need to drift. I mean, I knew it, but my brain it was very slow to react. Now I can do it no problem. But it was really awkward getting used to it. It didn't help that I started with Unleashed, which is early installment weirdness of the game. It's timed button presses, not just holding the boost down and continually boosting. Which makes the level design more exciting since it's all open, and so really emphasizes how you're just boosting forwards and not doing much, but still.
I just replayed all of the day stages of Unleashed today, and the best advice I can give you is, since the drift works by holding B and moving the control stick left or right, make sure to not spend too much time holding forwards on the control stick to move Sonic, because that makes it take longer to move the control stick left and right, so that you drift left and right. If you try to hold the control stick diagonally so that you can keep moving forwards and drifting left to right, then it's not really going to work. It makes it less reliable. So I guess I do I definitely appreciate more how the drift was handled in the later boost games. But the stomp in 3D seems less reliable. It feels like it's a lot more likely to just do the slide instead. I don't understand why the slide was introduced. It's just as bad as the somersault in SA2. You do the slide, like, when you stomp, and then you move right after the stomp, you slide. Even though the whole point of a stomp, and the whole appeal of it, is that it's great for precise platforming, because it immediately makes you stop and just fall straight down. But if you slide forwards after that, you're going to slide off the platform. Why did they map the slide and stomp to the same button? Why did they even introduce the slide at all? Like, I just don't understand. It just overcomplicates what's already a very difficult gameplay style to get into, because there's so many different things you need to learn right off the bat. I was thankful when I first played Unleashed, all the different tutorials for every individual skill, because it is a pretty overwhelming gameplay style to get into. There's so many abilities that modern Sonic has that Adventure Sonic doesn't. And even the things that he has in common with him are still different. His homing attack has a targeting reticule now, so you always know when you can homing attack. Except you don't, because you can easily try to homing attack too late, and then you'll fall, even though the targeting reticule didn't disappear instantly to immediately let you know that you can't homing attack anymore. So it kind of creates a bit of an illusion, like it appears when you can homing attack, but it doesn't disappear right away. But it's still a lot better than the previous games. And the movement when you're not boosting is pretty bad, especially in Unleashed. It doesn't entirely feel like you're controlling your character. More like you're just, like the whole time you play, you're hoping that you will control your character correctly. In fact, that's why I appreciate Unleashed Wii, because it's more challenging, the boost gameplay. It feels like it's a lot more of a challenge doing what I want,
And so it's a lot more, it has a lot more of a feeling of accomplishment when I play really well and get to the higher routes and stuff like that. It feels a lot more rewarding. I also like how the lightspeed dash in that game isn't restricted to only certain glowy trails of rings. Like, you can do it on any trail of rings you want, and that is fantastic because it means that you can straighten yourself out. Like, if you're turning, then you could just lightspeed dash and suddenly you're just moving forwards, which is what you want. The quick stepping in that game is, well, I like the visual effect more and the sound effect a lot more because it feels faster, more satisfying, but it's just harder to quick step a lot really quickly because it's not comfortable mashing the L and R buttons on the GameCube controller. That's why I hate the combat with the Werehog so much more in the Unleashed Wii version. Because the combat is literally just timing the L and R button presses. And, like, there's a stupid special attack that always misses if you do it on the ground. That's done by pressing L and R together, which is very likely to happen by accident. The combat is handled much better in the HD version where there's 3 attack buttons, and you can memorize the button combinations of certain attacks to make it a lot easier. Which means using the same attacks over and over again is just repetitive. Like, at least you can reliably do certain attacks, but on the other hand, the Werehog Wii levels are a lot better designed. For one, they're not nearly as long. There's multiple different Werehog levels for each country, but it's still a lot better. It's still a lot less exhausting than having to do an entire over 20-minute long Werehog level in one sitting, which is even more terrible when you're first time playing it. At least the levels are shorter. And on top of that, they don't have this slow, boring section in every single Werehog level where you have to slowly balance on these narrow platforms. And you always have to stop when the camera is turning because otherwise you'll walk off the edge. So it's just so boring and slow. And like in Shamar Knight, you have to grab onto some switch presser downers one at a time, carrying them all the way to a switch, and then do it again and again. It just pads out the level. Just like the combat. The combat in the Werehog levels is all about just forcing you to stay in one small area for longer than necessary, just to pad it out. Like, the Werehog levels are smaller, but they take longer because you're slower, and they're more padded out with the combat. I don't think forced combat belongs in a Sonic game. You're forced to fight practically every enemy because of the stupid purple gates that show up. Now, it would be a lot more tolerable if you could just skip them. Although, since there's an experience point system, you wouldn't really want to skip them because then you'll end up pretty weak. Even in Unleashed Wii, which has a good sense to not create EXP crystals when the enemies get hit, instead the experience automatically gets added to your score when you beat the level, rather than you having to worry about getting cheated out of experience because the XP crystals fall off the stage or something. Or, like, you hit the goal ring before you've collected all of them, because it just spawns in. That's another thing, Unleashed Wii doesn't have nearly as many mini-bosses. The very first level for the Werehog in HD Unleashed had a mini-boss that... The annoying thing about the mini-bosses is they would create shockwaves that would hit you multiple times. Like, you would get hit by, and you'd have to mash buttons in order to get up for some reason, which didn't happen in Unleashed. And you would get hit while you were mashing buttons and were defenseless. So you would get stun-locked, and I don't think that's good design at all. On the bright side, the mini-bosses are pretty easy to beat, especially in the Wii version, because you can just jump at them and special attack them over and over again. I don't understand why the special attack wasn't mapped to the B button. The B button in Unleashed has the stupid useless shield that sucks and I never use it. I think the one time I used it, like, on purpose, it didn't even work. So what's the point? I'm not even sure how it works. You have to collect shield items? That's another thing, the items they don't really make it clear what the items do when you pick them up from item boxes. And there's, like, items to fill up your Unleashed meter, but they don't fill it up nearly enough, so there's really no point to getting them. It doesn't really feel satisfying. The Unleashed mode is pretty cool. Like, it makes you stronger, it makes you attack faster. And it also knocks away enemies. Like, gives recoil, which is cool. And like, I don't know. I don't think the Werehog controls very well either. It's pretty slippery. And it's because of that when there are hits everywhere, it completely destroys my enjoyment. Because I don't trust the controls not to send me falling off into a pit. Like Chun-Nan Night, for example. And especially out of at night, it's just terrible because it's just so tense trying to avoid slipping off the edge. Which is a lot more likely to happen with modern Sonic. Like, drifting a lot is another thing that you should definitely do with Unleashed Sonic. Like, because, like, drift more than you think. It'll make it a lot easier for you to turn in general rather than just trying to turn while moving forwards. Which doesn't really work, it's kind of stiff. But anyways, with the Werehog, I don't like how, like, the levels, like, sometimes they make you look for keys to progress. And that was really annoying in Apatos, where I missed the key because the camera didn't show me that I should go to get it, because it didn't pan out to tell me that you can go right and there won't be an invisible wall. Like, there's a lot of areas, there's a lot of invisible walls and a lot of non-breakable objects that look exactly like objects you can break, like crates in Apatos. So, like, they expect you to explore and break everything and collect everything because that's how you get the best rank, but there's invisible walls, so how are you supposed to know where you can explore? And the camera is not free roaming, so you can't always see exactly where you're able to go. Like, a camera control is completely sacrificed post 06. You can't rotate it at all. At least in SA2, you could rotate it, even if it snapped back to its original position after you moved. Just like in the classic Sonic games where you could technically move the camera by holding up or down, but it would snap back right after you moved, so what's the point? Like, you just have to memorize what you saw. But anyways, I love the day stages, but the Werehog stages are too long, too monotonous, too repetitive, and too tense when there's pits. Like, they didn't have any pits in the Wii version until Spagonian Night. And with the day stages, they didn't have any until Chun-Nan. And Chun-Nan is kind of annoying because of all the knee-high walls that really didn't need to be there, and you're constantly boosting into them. Because you can't really see very well from far away. But it is very satisfying playing through the day stages and being good at them. Like, I like homie attacking the enemies. Like, a minor nitpick, I think homie attacking enemies feels a lot more satisfying when the targeting recul is green. Like in Generations. That's really minor though. In general, I love Unleashed. I love the gameplay. I mean, the tornado sections suck. They're exclusive to the HD version, thankfully. They're just quick time events and that's it. You just press the buttons on the screen and that's it. Honestly, the SA1 ones, while boring as hell, were at least a lot better. Because you can actually move around the plane. Although targeting objects and actually hitting them it took forever, so it threatened your life to actually try. It was better to just mash the shoot button. Which sucked that you needed to get a whole bunch of points to get an emblem. And they never tell you how to do it. And the boss fights of Unleashed suck. The only really good one... No, there aren't really any good ones. The day ones are basically Sonic Rush boss fights. Mixed with Advance 2 because it's all you constantly running, like automatically. But like, you can't get closer to the boss to attack it quicker. It's all scripted. Like, you're just waiting for your opportunity to attack, and that's boring as shit. Of course, the 2D sections are basically Advance 2 style, which is awful. The Werehog actually has the better boss fights, but they're still really dragged out, especially the Ice Morway one. And sometimes it can be cheap, like enemies attacking you while you're trying to fight the boss, which is always cheap and unnecessary. I didn't really like Eggman Land, especially the night one. Like, there's a huge amount of werehog levels for that. But even the day stage isn't really that fun. Like, there aren't enough guardrails to prevent you from falling off the edge. It doesn't really seem to be designed around your controls. Like, there's a lot of sections, like, something the game loves to do is making you quick step in sections with the worst possible camera angle for it because it's too low to the ground. And it's not letting you see what's ahead of you. So how are you supposed to know when the floor in front of you ends? How are you supposed to know exactly when you have to quick step? Like, you'll die constantly to Eggman Land because of the quickstepping sections alone. As for the story, I've already gone over how awful the story is. Any story with Chip the Scrappy Doo in it isn't really worthy of even being called okay. Like, it's got the blandest, lamest humor imaginable. No, let's just mention food. That's funny. Let's just do that. Like, it just feels like random executive meddling at the last minute. It's like they wrote a serious story, and then at the last minute they were told to add in comedy relief. And so they made Chip the darling of the executives. He's all over the credits, and no one's allowed to disagree with him unless they're a villain. Sonic has never shown to bicker with him or anything like that. He's instantly best friends with him. And he has such a stupid design and such a stupid, ear-grating voice that makes me want to mute the volume every time he speaks. I just hate everything about Chip. I don't understand why anybody defends him. He's literally a chihuahua like Scrappy Doo. He literally makes poses like Scrappy Doo. Sometimes even multiple times in the same cutscene. It's easy to miss some of them if you aren't paying attention. Like, another thing, he does funny background events. Like, he does stupid things in the background, which no one really pays attention to because it makes it feel like his jokes are just forced. Like, especially when he turns into a ghost and nobody questions it, it's stupid. It just feels forced and awkward. Like, they just added it in at the last minute. And it's like, people try to say that Unleashed Story is the bestest thing ever because it has both dark and lighthearted elements. But they don't actually work together, they're just thrown together. Like, the dark elements they're not fully utilized because they don't create enough emotional impact. They don't make you care about what's going on because actions don't have consequences in that plot. Tails' plane got shot down and it was not damaged afterwards. He just showed up and he was fine. Even in Sonic 2, and that story isn't really fleshed out to begin with. Even in Sonic 2, when Tails' plane was shot down, it came back with a rocket strapped to it. So, even that story had more consequences. Like, the planet got shattered into pieces. You think that would cause an apocalyptic scenario? I could go on a huge rant about just how stupid and condescending to the audience that is. That is way too dark or premised for any game, let alone Sonic. But nobody cares. It's not implied that a huge amount of people died or anything, although I guess that would make it a little too much when it's already pushing it to begin with. At least the Archie comic bothered to explain the water not sinking into the core as Chaos keeping the water cycle from being destroyed and stuff, because Chaos is the god of the water as well as destruction. And, like, it's just stupid. Like, Sonic turning into an edgy-looking werehog with sharp fangs and a deep, edgy voice, and angsting at one point over how he looks like a monster and his friends can't recognize him. Really? Even Shadow the Hedgehog didn't go that far. I don't know, the dark elements are too dark, and they aren't even properly utilized, and the lighthearted elements are just overly cartoony and stupid. It just makes you embarrassed to be watching the cutscenes. It's not even trying, it's like, it just mentioned food, and that makes it funny. 25 different times food was made the focus in that game. It's like they starved the writers. And people will try to pull stuff out of their ass, like, oh, it was a metaphor for new experiences. Even though food was the only thing that was used in that case. You'd think that if they were making a metaphor for new experiences, they would have more than just food. Like, all they do is just constantly mention it over and over again. Liking food is not a joke. It's a statement. It's like making jokes out of breathing or blinking. Chip was just fundamentally flawed. He was the scrappy dude of the Sonic series, and yet somehow a lot of people still like. I just don't understand why anybody defends Unleashed's plot, other than the fact that it looks so much better compared to Color's plot, which comes directly after it. Ignoring Black Knight, of course. And I guess one other side game. But anyways, just because Color's story sucks doesn't mean that Unleashed's story is good, you know? Like, people think it's the last good Sonic plot. No, that was Black Knight. With Unleashed, it's a harbinger of doom, you know? Like, it leads directly into Colors. It's just Chip. You think that there would be clear foreshadowing of the nonsense that came after it. I mean, at least Colors handled the wacky sidekick better, and that Yacker he just shut up. You know, he didn't say anything. He was just sort of a mime. And so I don't really hate Yacker. I don't feel anything about him. Except in Colors CS's ending, where he was just an annoying little kid. But anyways, Unleashed Wii, fantastic. I love how it's not as bloated as the overly long HD version. Like, there's no hub worlds wasting your time as you walk around in them. Like, the hub worlds, they only worked in SA1 because they had charm and they were small. Like, they were small, they had landmarks, and they were small and had charm. The hub worlds in Unleashed don't have any charm whatsoever. Why would you have any emotional attachment to them? It's not like the characters that we've grown up with live there. Like, Amy lives in Station Square. Tails and Sonic live in the Mystic Ruins. Angel Island. There's no Angel Island in this game. So what's the point of having hub worlds other than to pad stuff out? That and the mini-bosses. Unleashed Wii trimmed the fat of an already bloated game. And made it a lot more convenient too. It was released like a few days before the HD version. So it's not like it improved on it because it technically came before it. But yeah, it's just a lot more convenient. Aside from the stupid life system where you can't grind out lives, the maximum you can have is like, I guess 14 or something, because you need to get a whole bunch of medals. Like, that's another thing. You need to complete side missions after beating the day stages to progress with the game. I guess that's their way of compensating for not having the stupid pace grinding, the stupid medal hunting that the HD version is, where you have to revisit every single level and go through the hub worlds trying to find all the Sun and Moon medals. I mean, at least I don't have to find all of them, but still, it just reeks of bad design. Especially trying to find medals in the day stages when Sonic is not really built for exploring and collecting things in the day stages. Like, you want to go fast, but you can't. It's just fundamentally bad design. I don't really like the day missions and how they force you to do them, especially Eggman-led Day, where it forces you to beat the whole level under a time limit that keeps running down when you inevitably die. It took me over 40 minutes to beat that mission. It was almost a stopping point for me. But yeah, like, Unleashed does have its problems. It's definitely rolling some weirdness when it comes to the boost gameplay, but it's a pretty good introduction to it nonetheless. Like, it has a whole bunch of tutorials to make it less overwhelming, introducing you to a very complicated gameplay style. So, and it's also pretty easy. Like, I think just controlling your character is harder, because it's a different gameplay style from the boost gameplay we're all familiar with. But the levels themselves are a lot easier. Like, there's less bottomless pits. There's also almost no rail switching to begin with. So the grinding is a lot more boring. Like, grinding became extremely automated after SC2, which sucked because the most fun part about grinding was the challenge of staying on center of the rail, balancing, and holding B at the right times. Like, it really rewarded you for doing it right. Afterwards, grinding is only really, like, if you're gonna have grind rails, have them to transition between 2D and 3D. Because then it's really automated anyway, so you don't have to worry about, like, awkwardly going, like, Sonic drunkenly veering to the right because you're still holding right when you transition to a 3D section, which can kill you in Alaska Day in the HD version, by the way. I thought the HD levels were cheaper, but then I played them, and it was more that the later levels were a bit harder. It was really only Adabat that I had a huge problem with. And Shamar, because there's too much stuff in your way. But yeah. Now as for colors. I'll admit that colors was basically an alright game. Like, I don't really like how it was mostly 2D. Except it was pretending to be a main 3D Sonic game. Like, it was nice sort of how, like, it was a necessary evil having a focus on platforming after everyone complained about how Unleashed didn't have enough traditional platforming. But I think they should have just been honest and made it fully 2D if the intent was to make a 2D Sonic game focusing on modern Sonic's unique abilities with platforming in 2D and with the Wisps, which mostly work in 2D only. I think it would have felt better if it was all 2D then. Like, there's nothing wrong with having a modern Sonic game in fully 2D. And I don't understand why people wouldn't acknowledge that as main anyways. Especially if they had the same main Sonic cutscenes, I guess, that they had. Like it wouldn't be like the 2D Sonic cutscenes. The biggest problem with Colors' gameplay, to me, was that the controls were terrible. You moved way too fast, and that made overshooting the platforms really easy. You pretty much had to stomp every time you wanted to land on a platform. It didn't help that the platforming was so precise, especially places like Planet Wisp. Now again, I thought the game was alright to play, until Asteroid Coaster, which can go die in a fire, and Aquarium Park isn't really that great either. I thought I would like it because of the Drill Wisp in the water, but it turns out, like, the Drill Wisp doesn't exactly control the best, it just turns to the right or left. It doesn't help that they don't always give you enough Drill Wisp anyways. Most of the Wisps are pretty fun. I didn't think the Laser Wisp was very intuitive, because how are you supposed to know that you have to let go of the control stick, and that's how you fire it? How are you supposed to know that it's not, like why can't they just have it be let go of the Z button and that fires it? I didn't figure out how to fire the Laser Wisp until the end of the game. But yeah, like, most of the Wisps are fun, it's just the level design is too Mario-esque, it's too blocky, and the platforming expected of you is too precise for such a fast Sonic. As for the story, the inherent problem with Colors' story is that it's based on inherently shaky foundation because its entire appeal is if you like the jokes. Its entire appeal is based on something as inherently subjective as humor. Humor is inherently subjective. Not everyone's going to think the story is funny. And you need to think the story is funny to be distracted from all the problems that the plot has. If you don't like the jokes, then you're going to find them immature and obnoxious and blatant padding. You're going to see how pointless the cutscenes are and how they're blatant padding, where not much really gets accomplished. The characters are just standing around and talking and doing a stand-up comedy routine. It's not like there's action going on, like would actually be appropriate of a Sonic game, or even the comics. The characters are just standing around talking, so the cutscenes are very dull, not very interesting to watch. Some of the jokes go on for far too long, like Sonic being a smoked douchebag to the flying battleships of Eggman, and the translation jokes. In general, I just don't think it's a very good plot, and they remind you of Eggman's plan 10 times before you see the wisps being processed in the machine. It would have been a lot more effective emotionally if not only did they actually acknowledge that Yacker went missing for more than just one scene, but they didn't have the translator at all, and you just found out about what was happening to the wisps with a processing machine. You didn't immediately give the game away by having Orbot and Cubot and Eggman constantly wasting your time with predictable scenes
based around some stupid out-of-place accent joke. Like, I don't think jokes revolving around Texas and Italian stereotypes belong in a Sonic game. Those are realism jokes. Realism jokes in a game about a hedgehog that magically runs at the speed of sound. It's out of place. Everything about Color's story is forced and out of place. And that's all stuff you notice when you don't find it funny. I admit that I can find some of the cutscenes amusing at times. That's only if I'm in the right mood for it. I don't think it's a good plot if its entire foundation is shaky because humor is subjective. That's why Sonic should not be a comedy. I'm not about to say that any story in a video game should not be a comedy because humor is subjective. I mean, I guess it's alright. The main problem is Sonic is an action series. It should be focused on the action, not something as inherently subjective as humor. Making the heroes stop to try to make you laugh and be so smugly proud of their own jokes. When in an action series, the heroes need to be more down to earth and taking the situation more seriously. Well, it's the villains and the side characters that should be the comedy relief. I don't know. I just don't think that it was executed very well. It's just like Shadow the Hedgehog, and that went to extremes with the tone. Just like Shadow the Hedgehog, the game has aliens in it. It has a level with green liquid goop and electric guitars in its theme. Oh yeah, and it coincided with a new voice cast showing up. There's just so many parallels. It really does make you notice that they went way too far in the other direction. If they're going to have a light-hearted tone for a 3D Sonic game, do it like Heroes. I mean, Heroes, I guess, didn't have enough cutscenes, because Colors felt the need to pad itself out by having just as many cutscenes as you'd expect for a 3D Sonic game, when it has such a simple story that all the cutscenes feel like padding. It's not really giving you new stuff that you already don't know. Like in SA2, every cutscene told you new information. It was very fast-paced. But with Colors, it's like, why? Why does Planet Wisp Act 4 have a cutscene following it at all? It doesn't tell you anything new. At all. I mean, I guess the ice cream joke was kind of funny, and not the ice cream itself, like it was just referencing it and that's supposed to be funny. Like, do you think there's just talking about random funny words makes it funny, and making a pop culture reference? Like, we're making a pop culture reference, so laugh. Like, the humor is just so lazy and bland and forced and immature. And that's all stuff you notice if you don't find it funny, which a lot of people won't. That's the big problem with having a comedy for a Sonic game. It makes it extremely alienating to some people. Just like with Shadow the Hedgehog. Just like with 06. Now, I don't think that they would be able to please most of the fan base with a story. They could at least do like 51%, couldn't they? I just don't think they did a very good job. I don't think the dialogue was written very well at all. The main story was written by Sonic Team, so it's not like it's Pontac and Grass' fault completely. Even in the Japanese version, the story just sucked. I mean, they did a few things right. I liked how Sonic and Tails actually interact like friends. Like, they have chemistry together, aside from the few times when Tails was a douchebag towards him near the end of the game. Oh, look at me, I built a translator that was worthless the whole game. Seriously, Tails' personality in this game is that he's the bumbling idiot. He doubts that Eggman has an evil plan. He doubts that they had an easy time sneaking onto the space elevator for no reason, even though flashback right afterwards showed how wrong he was. It's just so stupid. It makes me wonder why people love Tails in that game for being all serious, being all independent and mature, and insulting Sonic like an ungrateful brat. Meanwhile, he was portrayed as an idiot the whole game. I love Orbot and Cubot. They basically give Eggman's robot army a face. Because they showed two different sides of them. They're both sentient robots who can talk like normal people, which is a huge step on its own. You have Orbot, who is aware that Eggman isn't really to be respected. He knows how arrogant and delusional he is,
so he's more deadpan. At the same time, he's not outright insulting him. Like, that would be kind of overkill considering Eggman's been turned into a parody of himself. It makes sense that he's more like a servile butler because he doesn't want to get scrapped. That's probably what happened to Ergo. And Cubot is probably how most of Eggman's robots are. He's naive and too stupid to realize Eggman isn't worth working for. At the same time, doesn't really seem to grasp that Eggman is his boss and sort of just... Or maybe that was just the gangster voice talking. But he also, like, Orbot said he never seemed to grasp that you were his boss in Colors DS. So that does establish his character a little bit. Sometimes Cubot can be enragingly stupid just for the sake of humor though, and I don't really like that. And I hate the Kermit the Frog voice they gave him in Lost World. I don't know why he doesn't just only have the Texas voice. That's the most annoying thing about the pointless padding out accent joke is that they should have just stuck with the cowboy voice and that was it. That made him a sort of folksy sort. I like how Eggman is. Like, I like how he's funny and sarcastic. But it doesn't really mean much if he's still just as one-dimensional cliche as ever. And he's just been turned into a parody of himself. They try to portray him as intimidating with the whole Eclipse Cannon .2 thing, only this one mind controls everybody for a few seconds so that all the cars will crash and all the surgeries will be messed up. But they never really talk about those consequences. So there's no emotional impact or fear whatsoever. There's no tension. Sonic and Tails don't even know about the cannon until... Do they ever know about it? I don't think so. Like, Tails gets brainwashed for just a few seconds, making you miss out on a cool boss fight, make you wonder why. Why would we think that he would have suddenly have enough power to brainwash everyone for more than 30 seconds? At least Colors DS explained it as him having a gigantic wisp that he uses to power his cannon. I'm guessing that was the Mother Nega Wisp, which was a much more climactic final boss than just fighting Eggman again. That's about as exciting as Mario fighting Bowser. Why are people excited about Sonic fighting Eggman again? Sure, it's rare in the 3D Sonic games, but that's because they're 3D Sonic games. They're supposed to be epic, more grander scale, you know? Now for a game that's gotten a bit more hype backlash as time went on, which I honestly thought was impossible because of how great it is. I'm talking about Sonic Generations. Now, the big problem people have with it recently is that it relies a lot on nostalgia. Like, it's playing it safe to a major degree. And even when it came out, people noticed that. Like, it had nothing but old levels. It didn't really do anything new. Like, even the classic Sonic gameplay, which was the alternate gameplay style of choice, it was basically classic Sonic again, which we had in the classic era. But the physics weren't perfect. Like, you constantly uncurl from ball form when you didn't want to, and that meant that you didn't move as fast through the level as you'd like, because you're holding down during slopes and loops, and you weren't staying in ball form. Plus, a lot of scripted sequences would just automatically make you run. And the gimp jump was pretty glaring. Stuff like that. It was also pretty annoying how in Generations 3DS, the classic physics were actually a lot more accurate. And you could tell because you had to jump onto springs. And I liked how in the HD version, you could just walk into springs or spin dash into them, and that was fine. I liked that because it kept the pace going instead of breaking it by forcing you to stop and jump. I think that's how springs should have been in the classic days. And speaking of that, the spin dash. The spin dash is so fun in Generations. Like, the acceleration is amazing, and it takes so long to slow down. You could just constantly spam it over and over again, and that gives you real thrills. The spin dash in the classics was borderline useless because the only way you could get speed from it was to do it right before a loop that was leading down into a downward slope, which is more rare than you'd expect, honestly. Only really did it a whole bunch
like the first few levels of each game in Sonic 3. So you did it in front of a loop or a slope. Otherwise, it slowed down way too quickly and was basically useless. So I like how the spin dash is overpowered in Generations. So there's that, but I don't really like how the elemental shields, while it's great that they're back, I just hate how they're restricted to skills rather than just being modders that you can find like it's no big deal. And it doesn't help that you don't start out a level with the shield. So it's easy to not realize that you need to press Y to equip it, or that you can do that, and that you can go pretty far into the level before realizing, oh, I can actually press Y to equip this. And if you get hit, you lose it and you have to die to get it back. I think it would have been better if the skills just made modders of that shield appear. And why are elemental shields restricted to classic Sonic? Why can't modern Sonic use it too? That would have been fun. But instead they just had to play it safe. At least there's not nearly as many wisps as in colors, because the wisps really just should have stayed in colors. They were only really good there. Even in Colors DS, most of the wisps didn't really control very well. It didn't help that the screen crunch was a huge problem. But in Generations, they only used wisps. They used the Spike Wisp and the Rocket Wisp for like one zone. That's it. Even then, the Spike Wisp isn't as good as in Colors. But modern Sonic, on the other hand, modern Sonic is what makes Generations so great. Well, that and the fact that, like, the big reason Generations is so great is that it's so consistently excellent. Like, with a lot of Sonic games, there are annoying parts you just have to push through. And Generations has it too. Like, it has the time meter. It has some irritating boss fights. Not as irritating as other games, but mostly on the first playthrough. And the later 3 levels are a drastic decrease in quality from the rest of the game. And like with the Dreamcast era levels, it starts out amazing, it gets slightly less amazing, and then it ends up being annoying in the first playthrough. Like, same goes with the classic era, I guess. Like, Green Hill and Chemical Plant Zone they're both fantastic. I have a hard time telling which is better, honestly. Then you get to Sky Sanctuary, and I was like, this is boring, I don't really want to play this again, because it's just 3D platforming with the slippery controls of modern Sonic, because it's not boosting, and it's literally just jumping, that's it. That's a big problem with Generations, its emphasis on platforming, is that its platforming is the most bland and basic imaginable, because it's literally just jumping, and that's it. Sonic Adventure 2 had more interesting platforming. And of course, like, Sonic Heroes had more interesting platforming because there were 3 characters in it. Like, there's so much more to do. With Generations, it just feels like a step back in terms of the level design. The level design isn't properly accommodating modern Sonic's abilities. Instead, it seems to be more focused on just basic jumping around. And there seems to be more 2D as well. And the 2D wasn't as annoying and Unleashed because the 2D section took full advantage of what modern Sonic could do. It wasn't just jumping. There was also wall jumping, sliding, stomping, and like stuff like that. But Generations barely ever takes advantage of those abilities. The best 2D section in all Generations is that one mission in Planet Wisp at dusk where you're taking full advantage of the stomp and the slide and the wall jump and everything. Why can't every 2D section in Generations be like that? Plus, it feels very redundant to have 2D section for modern Sonic. We already have classic Sonic there. It would have felt a lot more balanced to have fully 3D and then fully 2D. On the bright side, like Generations has padding as well. It's not the only, like, it doesn't have no padding, even though you think that it wouldn't have any padding since everyone likes to complain about how short it is. Like, that's the thing, another big issue people have with it is the lack of content.
and how short it is. And I'm just thinking, do you even own the PC version? Like, there's like trillions of different level mods, which basically extend the game's replayability to the point where it has a second quest. After you beat all the levels, you want to play all the level mods, and that adds a lot of game time all on its own. The PC version is the definitive version of the game. You can't say that it doesn't count just because it's one version. It's still got so much content. That's not even including the missions. Another testament to how great the game is that even the missions are consistently fantastic. Even though there's a time limit in all of them, the time limit is so lenient that it's not a big problem that makes it tense and ruins the missions like with Rush Adventure or Colors DS. Even the missions are great. They're fun, they're easy. I mean, some of the character missions, like the character missions are definitely the worst in the game. Like, they can be annoying. Some of them are unintuitive, like how you're supposed to make Amy launch you upwards. And sometimes the character missions just make you wish that you could play as them. Especially since they don't seem to play differently from Sonic. Like, why can't you just play as them and they play exactly like Sonic, except the Y button does something else? Especially with Knuckles' treasure hunting mission, which is a perfect example of how treasure hunting could be done right. Just dig for medals. There's more medals in the level than you need to collect. And there's an arrow always pointing exactly where you need to go, and sometimes it can even point upwards if necessary. I think that was how it worked anyways. It could work that way. Like, it just... even the missions are excellent. The missions are basically the form of padding, as well as Classic Sonic. And what's great about them is that you don't need to beat every single mission to progress to the next 3 zones. You can just beat one of each zone. You don't even have to beat one of each zone as both Sonics. And you can just beat whatever one you want. There are no specific missions that are mandatory. You'd think from all the LPs showing out only the character missions that the character missions are the mandatory ones, but that's not really true. So it really speaks to the game's quality when even the missions are consistently great. There are a few that are really terrible, like the stupid balloons mission from Rooftop Run that has no checkpoints at all. I really hated that one. The enemy placement was really cheap, and there were no checkpoints whatsoever. Not to mention it was so unintuitive how you exactly had to jump, rather than fall off the balloons. But I love the character mods that the PC version has. Like, you can basically play as practically any character you want. They all play exactly like Sonic, but that's fun. Like, the only ones that really change the gameplay are the Real Tails mod, where the air boost becomes an extended fly, and you clip through the floor and die if you get tired out with 2D. Which discourages me from using it, honestly. It's weird having flight or gliding mapped to the air boost. I don't know why they couldn't have just... I mean, I guess that was the only way they could keep the homie attack with you. But still, it just feels weird, and I don't feel like using the flight or glide with the real Knuckles mod when it just controls so weird. And it feels like the real Knuckles mod doesn't have the visual effect of the boost, so I don't feel like I'm boosting. I think maybe a lot less people would complain about boosts to win, and how it's supposedly just instant gratification and stuff, if there wasn't a visual effect for the boost. If instead Sonic just went faster. Then it would be compared to the Sonic Boom from Sonic Advance 2, and more people would be fine with it. Like, I think something that 3D Sonic games should try out is the Sonic Boom, where you move fast for a long enough period of time, and they reward you for that. They reward you for maintaining your speed by just giving you a burst of speed. Like, there you go. That would make the momentum feel like it exists, and still give you a burst of speed that's useful in the speed sections, because the only areas where you'd be able to consistently maintain speed for long enough to get that burst of speed would be extended speed sections. Like, the classic Sonic levels, they're really great. They're really well designed for this game. I mean, I especially love how in the 2D sections of this game, the camera is panned out so you can actually see what's ahead of you. You don't have a sprite that takes up a large amount of space on the screen. Like, the spin dash sends you so far that it doesn't entirely help, because you're still going to get stopped by walls that pop up on the right side of the screen quickly anyways. But you're not going to be suddenly running into enemies that suddenly pop up on the right side of the screen too quick for you to react. The only enemies that are really cheap are the projectile shooting ones. Like the ones for Crisis City, like the egg robos from Sky Sanctuary Zone that gave me so much trouble in the classic games. They fire slower, so they're not a problem anymore. Unless you play the mission where everything moves faster, then they're extremely cheap. Like, there are a few cheap parts of the game. But in general, this is such a fantastic game. So consistently good, so consistently well designed. This is easily the best Sonic game ever made. Like, Sonic 3 Knuckles is really good too, but there are a lot of annoying, or boring levels in it, especially in Sonic and Knuckles. And with Sonic Adventure, well, a lot of people like to bitch about how it's dated, ignoring Mario 64 and the like. And plus, like there's Big the Cat and Amy and stuff, but there's also really fantastic 3D gameplay styles that we never have anything like again, like Spin Dash Jump Sonic, flying around his tails in 3D, taking all sorts of shortcuts, and Gamma, of course. I wish he came back. Like, not the character because that would cheapen his death, but like, have his gameplay come back, but with Emerald, or Omega, but especially Emerald, because that would be really hype. I hate how he just dropped off the face of the earth, and people think that he's not canon just because he's only in handheld games. Like, Generations didn't reference the handheld games as much as it could have. All it did was just have unlockable songs from them, and even then, it chose the lamest possible ones from the advanced games. Like, Route 99? Really? Where's Chaos Angel? You're just going to have Leaf Forest there instead of Ice Paradise? And what about Secret Base would have been such a better theme rather than Neo Green Hill? Plus, like, Generations didn't have as much references as a lot of people would have liked. That's one of the big disappointing things about it. Like, people were looking forward to it because it had the colors writers and you think they would make fun of parts from Sonic's past history. It's like people are completely unaware that Pontiac and Graf aren't Sonic fans. How would they be able to make fun of stuff like Elise being kidnapped over and over again when they aren't Sonic fans? How would they even know about this stuff to make fun of it to begin with? The story was written by Sonic Team though, so it's not too much Pontiac and Graf's fault. They're not really to blame for the story being so bare bones and like wasted potential. Like, you have modern and classic Sonic meeting each other. Like, you think that'd be a great source of references, because you would have classic Sonic talking about his experiences and his life, and comparing what he sees in this game to what he's seen in his past, and like reacting, like, who's Shadow? Who's that? Who's that? Oh, this reminds me of this. But instead, he's just inexplicably made a mute to appease fanboys who aren't real fans. Like, classic Sonic talked every single time that he could have in the classic era. Whether it's Sonic CD, Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, Wacka Sonic Patrol Car, the comics, Sad AM, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic Underground, the OVA, he talked every time that he could have. It's just so arbitrary that he doesn't talk in this plot because it just feels like it's not the actual character. Like, it's just like, he might as well be Mario for all the personality he shows. He's not impatient, he doesn't have an attitude, he just has this stupid, nice, dopey smile on his face. And I guess they're trying to portray him how the Japanese portrayed him, but the Japanese, like, they didn't really know, they don't get Sonic. These are the same people who thought it'd be a good idea to have Sonic have fangs and a human girlfriend and live in a rock band. And we're honoring that? Really? It's just so clueless. I don't really like how it turned out. Like, you could tell there's a lot of cut story content, like Classic Tales just appears for like out of nowhere. We never see classic Knuckles or classic Amy show up. And the characters, like Sonic's friends, just stand around and do nothing. I don't buy that they just stand around and do nothing. Especially not Blaze. You think at least some of them would take the initiative. But more importantly, the classic selves meeting their modern selves, you'd think that that would drastically change past events. Because, like, classic Eggman finds out all of his future mistakes, and he decides to take measures to prevent those mistakes from being mistakes. Like, he brainwashed in Shadow when he meets him in SA2 to make sure that he never betrays him. Maybe he finds a way to brainwash Chaos too, and Zavok. That would certainly explain Sonic Forces. I hope that's the explanation. But instead, it just creates the implication that all the past games have been retconned, because how could they possibly have their events transpire when classic Eggman would grow up and he would remember what modern Eggman told him and he would make different plans? How would any of those events transpire? Why would Eggman... It's just so dumb. You know, even 06 didn't have its time travel retcon previous games. I mean, it retconned them in a sense, but that was because it was originally meant to be a reboot, which is why it's good that it sucked. Because otherwise we would have had all the past games be retconned. But at least its time travel was restrained to itself. It didn't affect anything, you know? I just don't really like Generations' story at all. But thankfully, you can skip it. And it's really short, too. It doesn't feel extremely padded out. Like, that's why I'm kind of thankful for the cut story content, because would it really have added anything anyways? Like, the cutscene after Chemical Plant Zone isn't really much. Like, it's just the characters saying, oh, this pink water makes me really nervous for some reason. It's as if I've completely forgotten about that harrowing experience with the rising water. And Sonic didn't really seem to remember it either. How does the hydrophobic forget about Chemical Plant Zone? Like, you think that that would be permanently etched into his memory? Like, people think there should have been a cutscene like that after every level, but wouldn't it just get repetitive? Like they'd just be saying, oh, I kind of remember this place, but I also kind of don't for no reason whatsoever. It wouldn't really mean anything. Like, one of the missed opportunities is they never really commented on how no one remembers Crisis City at all. Like, no one's like, huh, this is weird. What is this? I don't remember this. Why is a level from a burnt city that we've never seen before here? I'm assuming it's taken from another dimension. They really should have explained that. Like, this is supposed to be a big anniversary title, and the story is just so underwhelming and rushed. It's like they didn't even try. They had this cool concept. They didn't even try. They don't need time travel and a time meter to justify old levels, do they? I mean, can't they just have a normal adventure and then they just happen to be taken to old levels in the process? I mean, I guess that's what Forces is doing. You know, what's really glaring about the old levels reappearing in Forces is that it's not entirely old levels. So the old levels just feel like they're out of place. Like, they're just put there out of obligation because they're not really sure how else to appeal to people. But anyways, yeah, Generations is fantastic. Makes me wonder why it's so underrated these days. The cut content, the lack of content isn't a real flaw because of all the level mods. Like, seriously, it's not even an issue. That and the fact that there's like dozens of missions. Like, if you do all the missions alone, that adds a lot to your gameplay. The boost gameplay is really thrilling and satisfying. I mean, I wish the 3D sections had a lot more drifting, so it was actually exciting. Like, especially areas like Rooftop Run, they're nothing like they were in Unleashed. Generations with the Unleashed project is easily the best Sonic game ever made. Like, the Unleashed project levels are much better than Generations. But, like, classic Sonic's levels are good, modern Sonic's levels are good. Like, basically everything about it is good except the time meter. And even then, I was really lucky with the time meter. Like, I beat it without ever dying. That was, granted, that was because I did a huge amount of research before beating it. So I knew to switch to 2D to make sure I got a whole bunch of rings. And switch to 3D to attack him. And hold down the boost button until I got to the core and the cutscene started playing. And then I would spam the boost button and that would let me attack the core. And like the only problem I had was when they told me to press LB and RB together, and they never told me and hold them. Not to mention I had the subtitles turned off, so I couldn't actually hear what was being told to me. So I struggled for a bit until I had to turn up the volume. Like, the boss is unintuitive and dragged out, but I've definitely played worse. I think the final boss of Sonic Unleashed, even for the Wii, is a lot more frustrating and unintuitive. I don't know, that's just me.
And then there was the classic misstep Sonic Lost World. Everyone was expecting another boost game because that's what everyone was looking forward to after Generations. They wanted that boost gameplay, but with original levels. But instead, they decided to go for Lost World instead. Lost World, it sort of goes for adventure-style gameplay, but doesn't really work, because it adds a whole bunch of different things to overcomplicate it. Like, it brings back the spin dash, but the way the spin dash works is you have to hold a shoulder button, a trigger button of all things, to activate it, because the B button doesn't exist. I'm sure it does, but they just don't use it. Like, you have to hold the trigger button in order to make it happen. And then what the game doesn't tell you is you have to keep holding that button to make it keep going. And then hold a different trigger button in order to keep it going even more. Like, there's a good way to... Like, it's not nearly as good as SA1 Spin Dash, where you can just constantly mash the Spin Dash button and just move a lot faster. Also, like, well, I guess you can use it for spin dash jumps, but the level design isn't open enough to allow you to actually take advantage of that for cool shortcuts, like would be true in an actual adventure game. Instead, the level design is usually extremely linear. Nothing but, well, like there's either these cylindrical tubes, there's half pipes, like in the Sonic 2 special stages. Like the game developers decided, oh, you know the special stages in Sonic 2? Let's just make an entire game out of those. Like, the game has this weird gravity switching gimmick. Like in Sonic Extreme, only none of the people who worked on the game had even heard of Sonic Extreme. And Aaron Weber, who ran the Sonic Twitter page, he lied to the fans. He blatantly lied to the fans that the game was based off Sonic Extreme when it wasn't. How can anyone trust him when he was just such a sleazy car salesman there. Just blatantly lies to us. Like, the game has only 4 different types of level design set pieces when it comes to 3D. Like, there's the Windy Hill tube. Like, it's usually, like, the game loves to reuse the same piece of level design from the very first level in the game over and over again. It also likes to copy level design from Act 3 of Windy Hill as well. It has the half pipe. It has, it also has, like, occasionally it has some very open level, like, Desert Ruins Act 1 is the only example I can think of, and even then it's extremely bland. Like, there's really nothing to do in it. Like, the game in general is pretty bland, and when it's not, it's a very gimmicky game. Like, sometimes you roll fruit into blenders to make apple juice. Sometimes you roll into a snowball, and then you go through a sort of, like, you play pool. Like, it's very gimmicky, that game. Some of the levels are really cheap and bullshit. Like, Lava Mountain Act 3 is a very infamous example. Like, basically, it's a grind rails level where you have to Like, there's these bombs that insta-kill you. There's a lot of things that insta-kill you in this game. And you have to constantly jump in that level. Like, jump over insta-kill bombs, and jump over, like, parts of the area where the rail breaks off. And it's not instinctive to jump on rails. It doesn't help that the rail switching from generations, or even Unleashed, isn't there anymore. You have to sort of hold left or right and then press A. And granted that works, but still. But yeah, the game has a run button, just like Mario. In fact, the game is basically a Mario clone. In fact, the sheer minor details in which the game imitates Mario. The game is basically Mario's creepy stalker. Like, there's so many ways that it's this ripping off Super Mario Galaxy, or like New Super Mario Brothers, with the 2D sections being so blocky and flat. Like, I counted 2 instances of loop-de-loops. Like, one of them sent you into a knee-high wall you had to jump over right away. And another just dropped you downwards. Like, the loop-de-loops don't even... The loop-de-loops are so clumsily designed. They don't really take advantage of your burst of speed. And even when they do, they generally just send you into a dash pad anyways. There's so much automation in that game. Like, so many dash pads and springs. Like, there's a steering section in Ice Tube where the game steers for you. Like, even though people complain about the boost games being boost to win, you felt like you were a lot more in control of your character in that game. The run button is there to make you feel like you're always in control of your character. So you always feel like you're in control of your speed. Like, Sonic doesn't really have momentum in this game. He doesn't really have a sense of momentum. He just goes from walking very slowly to running. Like, I don't know why they can't just have a walk button. Since you never really want to, like, you're always going to be holding down the run button. Unless you're in 2D. In which case, the run button is also the parkour button in this game. So, if you're holding down the parkour button, you're going to get stuck on the walls in 2D. And if you press A then, you're going to somersault, and that can send you to your death. Like, they don't always program specific surfaces to be parkourable, and so you can get stuck on surfaces you don't want to. Like, it's annoying accidentally parkouring, and the parkouring isn't really made use of all that often anyways. Which is good because it's kind of clumsy, but still, it's only really used for, like, running across 2 different walls that remind you of the triangle jump walls of Sonic Heroes. Or, like, it's not really used all that often. Most of the level design is just generic platformer or Super Mario Galaxy gimmicks. It's not very fast-paced. The game is just boring. It has the super peel out, which is worthless. And it also has the kick. Like, that's another thing. You can't tell the difference between enemies. You can't tell when you're supposed to use the kick against enemies and when you're supposed to use the homing attack. It would have been good if, like, they brought back the badniks in this game. All the badniks are old ones. It would have been good if what they did was have the badniks be the ones you can jump into a homing attack, and have the non-badniks be the kick ones. But instead, there's no way to tell which ones you have to kick. And, like, the kick is supposed to be written as stronger, but all the Zeddy are immune to the kick except for Zavok, which suddenly you need to use the kick against him to make him vulnerable. And you have to fully charge the homing attack in order to kill him. Like, that's another thing. You can charge the homing attack in this game, but you can't choose which order you attack the enemies in. So you can end up automatically homing attacking a whole bunch of enemies, and then you end up homing attacking the flying enemy last, and then falling to your death, which happens a lot in the later levels, especially in the 3DS version, which is horrible. Like holding down a button and then watching Sonic homing attack a bunch of enemies isn't fun. Homing attacking a bunch of enemies by yourself is fun, because it feels like you're actually doing something. Was the homing attack really something that needed to be simplified? Not to mention it has a hard time even locking onto enemies in the first place. But anyways, like, it's just overcomplicated. Like, I don't know why you can't just homing attack every enemy. I don't know why the kick has to exist. And, like, the boss fights are some of the only good things about that game, because the boss fights are quick. They're
done over with really quickly for the most part, because if you fully charge the homing attack, then you can kill the Zeddy in just 2 hits, which is really good. Like, it means you don't have to deal with overly padded out boss fights. But, like, the story is the worst. Like the story, there are definitely better stories, but there are worse stories. Like, I'd rather watch the cutscenes in this game than the ones in Sonic Colors or Generations, since Generations doesn't really have a story, it's just sort of a waste of time. I'd rather watch, well, yeah, I don't know. It's like, the story is simple, but also trying to be epic at the same time, when for the most of the story, it was pretty simple, and so you don't really care when it tries to be epic. It has a very schizophrenic tone, like, it has a very overly bright and colorful art. It has a very bright and colorful art style, like Mario, but then it has the villains actually being threatening by using threatening lines and death threats, even Eggman. So it doesn't really know what tone to go for, and it doesn't play off that. It doesn't feel like it's aware how strange it is that it has dark tones. Like, saying threatening lines and never actually going through with them is one thing, but at one point Tails is actually threatened to be turned into a robot. Like, they actually introduced the concept of roboticization into a Sonic game. I never really liked the whole roboticization concept for Sonic. It feels very grimdark. Like, it feels like something out of a sci-fi horror movie. I don't understand how that belongs in Sonic, let alone any mascot platformer. But because a whole bunch of continuities decided to randomly start using it at the same time, like, people just accept it and want it to be in the games. Thankfully, Tails didn't get turned into a robot, but it's pretty weird. Like, apparently he reprogrammed the roboticization machine with a toothpick when he couldn't see what he was doing because he was lying on the bench staring at the ceiling, no less. And it made it so that it only dressed him up like a cyborg rather than actually making him one. And like, he's back to normal right afterwards in the next scene. Why didn't Sonic just take advantage of his new Mega Buster laser firing thing? Like Tails never does anything in the plot other than, like, restore the life energy to the planet at the end of the game. But that's at the end of the game. At least Colors has Tails try to be useful. At least there's the illusion that Tails is useful for most of the plot because he's got the translator machine. Sonic never needs it, but at least he's trying to do something. In this game, Tails is just a petulant brat. That's all he is. Like, he and Sonic have no chemistry at all in that game. Like, Tails is just such a ungrateful brat to him. He's just constantly insulting him. Sonic is just bullied the whole game. Like, I don't even really like Sonic that much in this game. He's, like, teasing the one-dimensional cliche Deadly Six, like an elementary school bully. And them being... It's not satisfying seeing him insult them because they're not even really characters to begin with. He's basically insulting a bunch of small, dumb children. Or, like, mental patients. Like, the Deadly Six are basically the 6 stereotypes. That's literally all they are. Their personalities can be described in just one word. The emo, the girl, the fat guy, the old Asian man, the generic villain, and the crazy one. The crazy psycho. Like, they're just so uninteresting. Xena could have been kind of interesting, because she didn't really like violence. Like, Zavok had to convince her to fight Sonic by saying that she was the only one pretty enough to do it. I don't see how being pretty has to do with being good at fighting. But yeah, like, maybe her disliking violence could have been used to make her not fight Sonic and help him. But no. Like, all she cares about is just painting her nails. Like, you could have easily fleshed out then. Like, had Xena, like, she's very focused on her appearance because she's insecure. And that's why she's gullible and easily manipulated by Zavok. Like, that's also why
one of the characters says that she doesn't eat. That she starves herself to keep her figure. That's literally in the game. And, like, the emo character, Zor, like, it could be explained that he's an emo because none of the Zeti really like him or understand him, so he became sadistic and enjoyed their suffering. Like, that reminds me of the one funny joke that the game has. Like, Zor runs in because, like, he found out before all the other Zeti that it was Tails they accidentally captured for bossization, not Sonic. And he said that they accidentally captured Tails instead, and all of the Zeti turn to him and go, "We know!" Sounds like a pretty simple joke, but it ended up getting a giggle on me the second time I heard it. For the most part, the game uses colors humor, but thankfully it's a lot less frequent and toned down. Sonic does call Eggman Baldy McNosehair, but Eggman doesn't even react to it. Like typical Pontac and Graph, they have a setup or a joke, but they have no punchline. They don't understand how humor writing works. I don't think comedy is really their thing, you know? Like, that's the thing, like, sometimes it has the childish writing of colors. Like, when Sonic and Tails, they constantly say, "Bite." And then at the end of it, they say to Eggman, at the same time no less, "You bite." And it's very awkward. This happened during the most infamous scene in the entire game. Basically, Tails' character was completely mangled in this game because, like he has a complete mood swing on Sonic. Like he yells at him that he trusts Eggman more than me. It just, like, he goes, it's not foreshadowed at all. And it's just for one scene, and then he's back to normal the next scene. And, like, he's happy with Sonic, and Sonic is happy with him. It's like it never happened. The story has no proper sense of narrative flow. Like, one minute Tails is screaming at Sonic about how he betrayed him because he was forced to get Eggman's help. And then the next, like Sonic didn't even want Eggman's help. Eggman just followed him after he knocked the conch out of his hand that was controlling the Deadly Six. Cause, like, that's something good, is that they portray Sonic as flawed because his quick thinking made him impulsive. So he freed the Zeti from Eggman's control. But, like, he doesn't even learn from that, though. After Tails gets captured, he said that he was too slow to save his buddy. Even though the lesson he should have been learning was that he reacted too quickly, and that's why Tails had to save him and get captured himself. Like, if he had just stopped and stayed still, then Tails would have warned him that it was a trap. Like, that's the thing, like, Sonic never learns his lesson. He thinks that he learned his lesson because he says to Tails that he'll never doubt him again, because Tails actually returned life energy to the planet, and Eggman wouldn't have done that. But it's like, Tails is portrayed as such a Gary Stu in this game. He's never allowed to be shown as wrong. He's always shown as right. He never once apologizes to Sonic for his behavior. He never apologizes to Sonic for anything. Like, he's so arrogant in this game. He's like, fixing a propeller? That's about as hard as taking a nap. And he fixes it in the same cutscene. And this was at the beginning of the game, so it just makes you wonder why they don't just fly the plane to Eggman's machine right away. I guess then there wouldn't have been a game, but, like, SA2 didn't have the problem of they could have just skipped all the levels. The levels were very highly connected to the plot. They couldn't have skipped them even if they wanted to, even though they had the tornado. It's like, and before the whole fixing the propeller thing, Tails made impossible claims about how, like, he reprogrammed a supercomputer using dishwater and stuff like that. He said that he built a TV out of paper clips, which is impossible. And, like, he says that again when he's just about to reprogram the roboticizer, when he can't see what he's doing. He's such a Gary Stu in this game. he's overpowered. Like, he's so lazy. Like, he's such a lazy character. They just turn him into Jimmy Neutron. Like, he can do anything because he's an engineer. The one time he ever made a mistake, which was actually a pretty good scene, was when he put Cubot's head onto crab meat, and that badnik attacked him because I guess that's just how badniks work. And like, that was the one stupid thing he did, and he was portrayed as stupid for doing so. Eggman even snarfed at him for it. I think it would have been a lot better if he called him an idiot outright, but like, Eggman in general has pretty good lines in this game. He's pretty sarcastic. He's not a parody of himself like he's in Colors. Like, Orba and Cubot are also pretty good in this game. But yeah, like, aside from the goofy circus music that's playing in what's supposed to be a dramatic, serious scene, it's a pretty good scene. Although it's kind of weird how Eggman decided to save Tails. Why did he do that? Especially since, like, he tries to excuse it as, like the writers try to excuse it as Eggman saying, "I'm a complicated guy." No, he isn't. He's a cliche. He's a one-dimensional cardboard box of a villain with no excuse. How? They're just trying to lazily justify how inconsistent they rate him even in one scene. Why would he save Tails? That's so out of character for him. I mean, I guess, like, no, he was planning to be the one to fix the machine. Like, he obviously had no intention of restoring the life energy to the planet. But they didn't know that. So it's like, it's not like he needed Tails around. It's just so stupid. This plot is so stupid. The Deadly Six are completely one-dimensional, which makes it really annoying how they have so many cutscenes devoted to them. There's so many cutscenes in this game, even more than in Colors. Like, it feels like you see a cutscene almost every time that you start a new level. At least in Colors, the cutscenes, like, there's a cutscene for beating Act 2 of Tropical Resort. Like, there's another cutscene, and there's obviously cutscenes before every boss fight. And there was cutscenes for Act 4 of Planet Wisp and another zone. But it's not like it was after every single level got started. Like, they never explain what the Lost Hex is. Like, they never explain what the planet that the Zeti live in is. They don't explain what the Zeti are and why there's only 6 of them. And how they managed to survive if there's only 6 of them and they're apparently not related to each other. Like, they never explain anything in this game. They never explain, like, how Eggman got the cacophonic conch. And, like, Ian Flynn assumed that everything would be explained, but it wasn't. And Tails' character was completely mangled. I don't understand how anyone but the most die-hard of Tails fanboys can possibly defend that. That's just not who Tails is. Like, he's not a passive-aggressive Jimmy Neutron arrogant brat. He's supposed to be a lot nicer and sweeter and humble. He's supposed to be insecure. He's supposed to be sympathetic, naive, not a brat. The game in general is just a Mario clone. It's not really a good follow-up.